Do it after. Okay, go ahead. No, you're the chair of the meeting. You can make the statement. Yeah, just do it after. Just do it after the report. Just do it after the agenda.
Yeah. Do it. Just move down slightly.
Yeah. No.
Well, improve the agenda.
Yeah, but she's saying do it before the roll call. Yeah.
And then you adapt the balance of the agenda. Just take that out. Yeah, just take it out.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying.
You didn't say it wasn't. No. When I threw the email and stuff, I didn't see that he wasn't. He might have won.
Huh?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the meeting. I'd like to welcome our Planning Commission members for our joint meeting here. Thank you for everyone for coming. And before we get started, I would like to make a correction to the agenda. To let everyone know, our joint session with the Planning Commission tonight is only to learn and understand our sewer capacity and has nothing to do with the Biltmore development. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Andrew, would you like to do the roll call?
Thomas?
Here.
Otto?
Here.
Braun? Here. Westover? Here. Dockett?
Here.
Chick? Here. Ingstrom?
Here. Ken, would you like to do the roll call for the Planning Commission?
Certainly. Chockley? Chick?
Here.
I'm present. Cousineau, absent with notice. Iquento? Here. Roman?
Here.
And Stanalicio is absent with notice. We have a quorum.
All right, on to adopt the balance of the agenda. I would like to make that correction on the joint session with the Planning Commission. Number 1, cross out proposed Biltmore development, please. Any other changes or additions? I'll make a motion to adopt. Oh, sorry, Wayne.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda for the Northfield Township Board, November 11th, 2014 meeting as amended.
I'll support. Chick motioned, Ingstrom supported. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. And that takes us on to our next order of business, which is call to the public. I'll remind everyone that this is an opportunity to share your thoughts, and it's not a question and answer session, and we do limit everyone's comments to 3 minutes. Do we have our first speaker? Thank you, Mary. Come on up.
Mary Baldwin, 9211 Brookside. I'm certainly glad that the November 4th election is over. But one thing that I thought was rather odd and completely not right was people handing out flyers that had nothing to do with anything on the ballot. Apparently there's no law against this, but why would the group that was behind it hand out flyers at the voting area against the possible purchase of 460 plus acres by a developer? I believe the answer would be to stop development in Northfield Township at any cost and to polarize this community once again. Quite frankly, I'm sick and tired that every time there's a positive plan in the works to move this township forward, a group has to put up as many stumbling blocks as possible. I guess they didn't understand or listen to the statement that the developer made at the board meeting when he made his presentation that he was willing to sit down and work with the people as to what they wanted. That statement is pretty explanatory. Also at that same meeting, there were farmers in attendance that stated they can't farm their land anymore because it is no longer any good for farming. Development means that everyone benefits. That means schools, businesses moving into the area, and maybe Myers finally building their store. Also, property values going up, which benefits the property owner should they decide to sell. It's disheartening to go into other townships near us and see the new construction of homes and businesses, and here we are trying to move forward, but not with the help of some. If this development doesn't go through, for whatever the reason, Northfield Township is, I'll let you finish it, I'll fill in the blank. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers this evening?
Good evening. Ed Voitis, 6235 Helena Road. 2 points. One, it was unfortunate that the school annexation didn't pass. Our schools are in peril. The numbers are declining. Our budget deficits. The annexation certainly would have helped. When you think about how Ann Arbor voted, we got to ask ourselves, have we been good neighbors? You know, when Mike Moran was here from Ann Arbor Township and he told us about the $9 million they've collected through taxes and grants to preserve the farmland on the south side of the Joy Road, and then here we are considering a massive development on the north side of Joy Road in the middle of the farms with a massive sewer expansion possibility, you can understand why they may not like us and why we really haven't been very good neighbors. Something that we should think about in the future. We're going to need them. Our schools are going to need an answer. We're going to need our neighbors probably to get out of this mess. So we need them. Number two, we were at the polls on Tuesday in force because we really wanted to tell people about what was going on. A lot of people didn't know about it. I can tell you that you have no mandate to develop farmland in the south part of the township. It's very clear that over 90% of the people that we talked to were very much against this and want you to support the master plan. They don't want massive development. We feel very strongly about this, and the reason we were there is because most people in the township really didn't know about it. That's one of the problems. The communication hasn't been great. Most people aren't for it, are really against it. We hope you don't push this further. Please follow the master plan. If you decide not to do that, you should know we feel we have the support to push forward with the recall, and we plan to do that. We don't want to do that. It's not a threat. We want to work with you. We want you to follow the master plan. A lot of effort, time, money went into the development of that. We don't need a different change. We need you to follow the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other people that would like to speak this evening?
Good evening. Susie Winkowski, 5558 Hellner Road. I find it a little disconcerting that this meeting is even happening tonight, and I want to ask if you're seriously contemplating asking the residents of this township to foot the bill for a $20 million sewer expansion, when, as Ed said, the majority of the residents do not want it. You have the evidence from the 1996 survey, the referendum in 2004, and the master plan developed in 2012. And those all speak to the fact that the majority of the residents do not want this type of development or sewer expansion. The majority of residents want a little growth in the appropriate places as designated by our master plan, and preservation of open spaces and farmland. I don't know how many other ways that we can express this message, because it doesn't appear to be getting through. So I'm appalled that we're even continuing to entertain this idea. I, along with Ed, was at the polls for several hours on the election day, and again had the same experience that the majority of people that I spoke with were not in favor of this development, and they were in favor of supporting the master plan. The residents here are already overburdened with taxes to pay off this building and $33 million for the high school. I don't think you're going to find a lot of support or a lot of stomach for footing a bill for a huge sewer expansion. I think it would be wise, as suggested several times, that we, if we're contemplating changes to the master plan, that we get input from the residents, that we have design charrettes like we did in 2012, so that you can hear from the residents and not just to the developers what's appropriate for these areas. And I know that this is not really a good way to do this, but there is a map on northfieldneighbors.today, which is straight from the master plan, that shows the areas, lots and lots of acreage close to the hamlet, close to the lake, that was rezoned during the master plan for development. And it might be a great idea to brainstorm some ideas for maybe development of the Van Curler property or the former Johnson's Control sites. Those are prime areas for development that fit in with our master plan. If you read the master plan, the area that Biltmore proposes, the development strategies for that area are stated in our master plan: preserve open space, woodlands, and natural features. Discourage extension of public sewers. Establish programs that maintain the viability of agricultural products. And again, preserve open space and natural features. So I ask you again, please stick with the plan. And if you would be so kind to somehow let us know that our voices are being heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening?
Hello, I'm Stephen Robinson, a new resident at 5510 Hellner Road, and I'd just like to say I see this as an irresponsible use of taxpayer money. Millions and millions of dollars being spent on new infrastructure in areas where we're not even positive there will be an influx of new people. There are plenty of unoccupied condos in Ann Arbor proper, and I'd really like to see a more properly constructive business plan before something like this is put in place. We're in this large room that was not too long ago constructed, and we've just got one cubicle in here occupied. So I don't know, I'd just like to see more responsible use of tax money. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening, Kitty Burkhart, Nala Road, Whitmore Lake. I'd like to take back a little further than 96. I'm sure a lot of you are aware, but there was a referendum in the early 80s when we had another developer trying to redo, I think it was about 700 acres, into industrial. And the Township Planning Commission voted for it. There was a referendum that turned it around because the people of this township have said since the mid-80s they would like the rural character maintained. We were very happy to see a master plan that had input from the residents that worked and tried to expand where the growth should be, where it made sense to be. But this township, for over 30 years, has been very specific that they would like the residents of this township, the majority of the residents of this township, have been very specific that they wanted to keep the rural character of this township. That does not mean no growth. The group in the 80s was the group that helped develop North Territorial and put business in there. It made sense. The group also worked on the expansion of the sewer because there was a lawsuit with Livingston County, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, and that we had specific limitations of how big the sewer could be and how much could flow out. As you all know, everything goes north into Livingston. We need to take all of that into consideration, what the people of this township want and what has been said in lawsuits when we tried to grow the sewer without working with our neighbors and our neighboring townships. We need to work together. We do not need to be adversarial. And the people of this township for over 30 years have been very consistent in saying what they want. And I think the elected officials and the appointed officials of this township need to listen to the residents. They need to work with the residents, not against the residents. The residents have been very willing to work with this township, willing to make plans, very happy with the master plan that you spent a lot of time and a lot of money and input from the residents. Don't throw it away. Work with the residents. Work with what they've been saying they want for over 30 years. And they're very strong, the residents. If you don't do it, they'll turn it around. We've had referendums turning it around. This one came back in and said, not zoning, tried to do it with master plan. A little bit different. The residents want to work with you. Please work with us.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening?
Hi, David Gordon, 5558 Helena Road. I got 3 minutes. I got some information I'd like to pass out to the board and the Planning Commission. And I'm just kind of curious as to why we're here today, aside, of course, from the fact that Biltmore Development of Grosse Pointe Farms has a proposal in front of the Planning Commission. I think we're here because we may be heading down the wrong path based on some incorrect assumptions. One of the assumptions is that growth is the #1 priority and the #1 job for the elected and appointed officials here. I've read a number of emails that went back and forth between various members of these two bodies, and I know that a number of members, Janet Chick and Jackie Otto, for instance, have said that they want to make their decisions based on facts, not opinions. I know that there's a number of other people, probably the majority here, feel the same way. There may be the assumption that growth is so important because we've got a supervisor who got elected on a platform of growth, but the facts which I'll give to you here from the Washtenaw County Elections Bureau show that anybody who gets the nomination as a Republican in this township since 1984 gets elected. They get between 50 and 58% of the vote. Our current supervisor got the lowest percentage of vote of anybody since 1984. It was not a mandate to turn farmland into subdivisions. And it was not a mandate to ignore the master plan. She and I had a conversation last week, or maybe a little bit longer ago, about how we got here, and that Mr. Fink was hired as the township manager and is under the impression, as a very ambitious and hardworking fellow, that he's trying to accomplish the agenda of the board. But the fact is that we have a survey from 1988 that says that the #1 priority of this community is farmland preservation and open space, by a vast majority. We have 77% of the people said it was higher, very high, that we preserve undeveloped natural areas. 65% said preserving agricultural land in the areas planned for it was higher, very high. That was the second highest percentage. And 62% said they want to improve the appearance of downtown Whitmore Lake. What was the most unpopular idea, the lowest priority, and I'll pass this out to you, was reducing the minimum lot size in agricultural areas for residential development. I saw an email from Kathy Braun to the township manager reminding him that we had this fight 10 years ago. There's no point in having it again. We know what the residents want. They weren't fooled 10 years ago. They came out very strongly, 67% against a rezoning of farmland. Ken Dignan at the polls last Tuesday was overheard saying that he thinks the Biltmore plan is too large for the area. I think the residents are upset because we come up here and we ask for things and then we never, it's not a dialogue, so we don't ever hear any feedback like, we think this project is too big, or we think the master plan is a good idea, or we think farmland preservation is something we ought to be working on in this township because it's the #1 priority. I would urge the board and the Planning Commission, before they make any dramatic changes, to maybe do another survey. If you think the 1996 survey wasn't accurate, then let's do another one. Let's see if the residents are willing to pony up money for for a subdivision, which is going to cost tens of millions of dollars in sewers, not to mention police, fire, roads, and everything else, or whether they'd rather put up some money for farmland preservation. They did it in Ann Arbor Township, and they got a surprising result, and now there's 1,100 acres on our southern border that are going to stay as farms. We have a bad history in this township of overspending on population growth that doesn't arrive. I hope we don't do that with our sewers. Thank you very much, and I would like it if somebody could put this onto our website, the Biltmore Plan, on the news section, on the very first page, because there's a lot of people that we talked to at the polls that had no idea this was even going on. And this is big news for us. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else?
Dale Brewer, 11548 East Shore Drive, Whitmore Lake. I wasn't going to speak until the end, but I think it's pertinent to bring it up at this point. I'd just like to say that these board members in both the Planning Commission and the Township Board are listening, and they are following the legislative process that's put before them to act upon any proposal that comes to them. You say they're not listening and discussing or openly making comments on the master plan. I hear it at every meeting that I'm at. There's discussion on the master plan. There's comments that what's going in. This is the process that the legislature requires to take place. This does not mean that they're going to make a change or that there will be a change in favor of Biltmore or you, the residents that are speaking against it. You talked about the Van Curler property. At the moment, there's still no interest in any development by the Van Curler Corporation to develop the property. Johnson Controls has, there's some potential that there'll be some development on that in the spring. These are things that have come up at these meetings, so they need to be looked at. In reference to sewer expansion, it's not the township that is going to be expending, in the case of sewer expansion, as far as the general residents. It's the residents or the users in the district that will be paying for that expansion and that will be paying for the expansions that are necessary at the sewer plant individually and collectively with the current users, depending on how they're prorated and put together. So again, it's not an expense that's going to be borne by every resident of the township, and it shouldn't be looked at that way. And furthermore, everybody is so proud of Ann Arbor Township, but you also have to look at the demographic of Ann Arbor Township. Ann Arbor Township's demographic is entirely different in both the population, the economic status, and everything from what Northfield Township is. The ability for them to fund was provided by, again, the vote of the people down there, and they did make a decision to, put some money into it. But again, they had a population and a demographic that had the availability and had the excess funds. I think there's a lot of people in Northfield Township that are struggling to maintain their own well-being, let alone look at putting money into preserving farmland. Whether the development goes forward or the development doesn't, the Biltmore, someday something is going to happen. And you can't look at the little nooks in the smaller areas and say, this is what the answer for Northfield Township is. It has to be looked at in a broader sense. It has to be looked at for the benefit of all the people. I think I probably went over my 3 minutes. I apologize.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening?
Hello, my name's Heidi Braun. I'm at 5510 Hellner Road. I've lived here since the year 2000. I support that 2012 master plan. I'm against the development, light pollution, traffic. I moved out here for the rural aspect of what this township is, and I think has been supported over time. I grew up in Algonac, Michigan, which is in the St. Clair River on an island. And when our township could not support growth, what they did is they developed their downtown. They got that in order so that people wanted to be downtown, and it brought people to our township. I think that's a really good idea for this township. I'm against the sewer. I don't want to spend money on it, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hello, my name is Robin Voitis, 6235 Hellner. And I also was one of the people on voting day, giving people some information. I know it's very hard in a rural setting in Northfield Township to really get all this information out to people about what is the latest in the developments and what the board is dealing with every day. That was our agenda, to inform people. It was very amazing, like what Susie had said, that I would say over 90% of the people didn't even have a clue about the proposed development. And when they did find out, it was overwhelming against. We keep hearing master plan, and we also keep hearing a group of people who are so completely anti-development. But yet when these people come up and talk, you don't hear that. They say, let's develop, but let's go with the master plan. Everybody here, well, I don't know about the Planning Commission, but you're elected officials. I would think that that would be disturbing if I was to have to be responsible for a vote that would affect so many lives, and then I would hear that the majority of the people didn't even know that this was something that you were going to be deciding on. I don't think I could stand that. Let's let the people know what is happening. Let them decide. Some of the people that spoke in favor or sounded like they were in support of development sounded from their address like they were in the city. And it's funny, everybody says, not in my backyard. I do live near the development. But I also came in a time when it was what the master plan said, let's let us develop in 5-acre parcels. And if this development goes through and this is approved, what do we say to the people who just purchased their land and built houses on 5-acre parcels? And the farmers who owned that property and divided it up according to the master plan? What do we say to them? Once again, the master plan keeps coming up because I think that is something that the majority of the people in our township knew about and supported, and they supported that kind of development. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening?
Hi, my name is Mary Christensen, and I live at 409 East Shore Drive, and I'm fairly new to the community. I wanted just to say thank you to the people for handing out the information, because I am sort of a closet urban planner, and I believe strongly in Whitmore Lake as a community. And I was really surprised to hear there was a master plan. And again, I was here at the Planning Commission meeting, and I said this then, I'm thrilled that there was a very carefully thought out plan for the community. And I believe that's an imperative. You have a gem here. It's a beautiful, rural, small town with a great history. It used to be a community that people from Ann Arbor routinely came up to. And I just strongly feel that we should build this community and not ditch it and become a Canton with a huge development off in the southern parts. I do live right in the town, or close to the center of town. And anyway, I hope you all will really carefully consider all the comments here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael Gallia, 6211 Hellner. I feel like it's deja vu all over again. I stood here about 10 years ago when there was going to be another large development, and I'm going to say tonight what I said then: stick to the master plan. The master plan has been developed, at great time and expense, by this township, and that master plan reflects what we see our community to be, not what outsiders see, not individuals that want to come here, and develop. I'm happy to have developers come in here if they conform to our master plan. Okay, because what's going to happen if we allow this development to go through, the developer will make their money and leave, and we're going to be stuck with the attendant problems that are going to result, which is going to be what's going to happen to Whitmore Lake Road. Traffic congestion, higher taxes, and things of that sort. This is the community we want. It's reflected and manifested in that master plan, so please stick to it. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. I'm at 6235 Hellner Road. I am one of the youth of this community, and I really want to encourage you to preserve the rural aspect of our community because that is so important to us. I really want to emphasize that we are not against development. However, we are against this particular development for several reasons. First, there is an overwhelming amount of the population in this area that is not in favor of it. It does not preserve our rural community. The sewer evaluation that was done proved that the current sewer is inadequate, and this would unnecessarily raise our taxes, which I don't think anybody here wants. And also, it violates our master plan. So I just want to ask you to please remember your roles and what your responsibility is here today, and please act in the best interests of the community.
Can you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, Laura Voitis.
Great, thank you. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Craig Warburton. I live at 450 West Joy Road. I own a business in Ann Arbor, and with a lot of development going on around there, I continually get postcards from them telling me they're thinking about this project or thinking about that project. For some reason, my property borders almost 18% of the Biltmore property, and the only thing I find out is by rumor and innuendo on the streets. It's really tough to follow your public announcements in the paper for whatever that's worth. But why does this have to be such an adversarial relationship? I really don't understand why this is continuing. You have standards in the master plan. I was very struck by Madam Supervisor's statement at the last combined meeting that they missed out on the last couple developments, and by goodness, they weren't going to miss out on this one. And it seems there's a predisposition to this that supersedes any kind of common sense or adherence to the plans that are in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak tonight?
Good evening. My name is Lenore Zelenak. I live at 144 6 Mile. Again, stick to the master plan. Planning is key to success. I look at this building. It was planned for $3.7 million. 7 elected officials decided to double it. We have been paying for it ever since. Again, planning is key to success. Please stick to the master plan.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mike Chikella, 7789 Sutton Road. Builders do what they do. They want to develop. You give them any space, they'll put many houses as they can on it. I've had that discussion with several developers that have come to the township in my role as supervisor. Pretty much in the same area, pretty much the same number of homes, and just didn't get it. That's really not was appropriate for that area and something that the community really wanted. And it's hard to speak to the sewer project because there's no specifics relative to that. So it's hard to be critical of. The only caution I would give, it took 4 years to actually get us back on financial track. And the S&P, Standard & Poor's, changed our rating we had a negative outlook to one that was stable, and that's because we made some prudent financial decisions. And I think, and some of you, if you want to see it, I have the stuff from Howell Township, from Sylvan Township, where all those residents are paying because of litigation all the residents are paying for sewers that they didn't want, because money was put forth up first by the townships to have development go in. And the developers never showed up, and there's no assurance by any developer that they're going to complete or finish the projects that they start. The only thing we know for sure is if we put up money, we may or may not get it back. So in your consideration in terms of expanding the sewer to accommodate any development down there, it's given the history of this township, and given the fact that we're just financially stable, makes no sense at all that any consideration should be given to a sewer expansion down there to accommodate a significant amount of development that most of the residents do not want and have said in the master plan and at the ballot box numerous times. So I would just hope the board would consider all that, and I really don't want to have to do like Sylvan did or Howell Township, where they actually had to tax every resident. I think the number was $400 to $600 a home in order to pay a $13 million sewer assessment that no one really wanted, because the developers said they were coming, they were going to do all this. I think more effort should be given and more pressure put on Van Curler and to develop the downtown and give us a downtown. When I left as supervisor, Marlene, I still owe you the plans of actually developing and putting in a nice development downtown for stores, restaurants, and apartments. We don't have a downtown, and it would be nice, and it's kind of like we have the view by the lake that no one else has, and I think any effort for development should be directed towards that. And I think that would be a huge success for us as a community. So my only caution is that we do not acquire any more debt. And any money that we do have should be helping paying down the debt on this building and allowing us to lower taxes, since we're the highest tax township in Washtenaw County, other than Ypsilanti Township, which gets most of its services from the city of Ypsilanti. I appreciate your time. Again, I would agree that master plan really reflects what the community wants, and I would suggest that this board would follow that master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening?
Good evening, Amy Grambo, 5165 Hellner Road. I think the gentleman before me spoke very eloquently about what I think might be a positive reaction to what we're all feeling very emotional about this situation, and maybe we need to look for some positive solutions maybe that might work. And I'm just wondering if breaking the master plan for one particular developer wouldn't open up Pandora's box for many others to come in that we couldn't control. And I don't feel like this is in control. And I think that, again, master plans, plan control is the name of the game. And I think that, I don't know, $30 million for a sewer system divided by how many people? Well, let's do the math there. And I don't know if that's correct math or not, but I don't think anybody does know what the correct math is. It's a lot of dollars for us to handle for something that none. I don't know. Is it appropriate to say? Can we show?
No.
No. Okay. So anyway, I just again caution us to break the master plan and for one, and think about what that might do for all the others that might come in and do things that we don't necessarily want. So, thank you very much for listening.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this evening?
Pete Mishangi, 409 East Shore Drive, just a resident. Just want to mention a few other things.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your last name.
Pete Mishangi, M-I-S-A-N-G-Y.
Thank you.
A lot of discussion about, it seems like a gamble. I hadn't heard that before. It actually is a gamble that the developer will follow through. And I've never heard anything about the tax implications. Several people have mentioned that $20 to $30 million expansion, that'll probably be on the backs of the current taxpayers. But a developer like that doesn't seem like it really helps the community. First, they are outside the boundary of the school district, so we all just got heavily involved in trying to save the school district here, and it's not going to add any, I don't think, to that, from my understanding. It's outside the boundaries purposely so they could be part of Ann Arbor School District. So that doesn't sound like a development that will really support the community in the hamlet. The master plan seems to be the voice of the people. If we want to change it, put it up for the whole community to look at it again. I don't think the commission here should amend it without getting the whole community involved again. One other thing I was curious about, I've tried to recently got involved in just trying to understand what's going on, but I've talked to some people about, we already have bypasses on the current sewer system, and my understanding is it was put in to preserve the two lakes. And you'd hate to see any development, especially a large development like that, have more bypasses and then have some problems with our own sewers or sewer system or the lakes themselves. An expansion going south doesn't seem to, I can imagine a large development and strip malls and maybe a Myers building out that way. That doesn't sound like it's going to help businesses in the hamlet area of Whitmore Lake. So I just came here to learn and I support the idea of sticking with the master plan. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Jeff Souza, 7641 Edmond Avenue, down by Horseshoe Lake. My wife and I came here, almost 20 years ago, and we came here because we were struck by what we felt Whitmore Lake was. We felt it was a diamond in the rough, and we thought for sure, give it 10 years, boy, this diamond is going to be polished. I mean, there's so much opportunity downtown. Whitmore Lake itself is a beautiful all-purpose lake, so is Horseshoe Lake. But without all the problems that Whitmore Lake itself has. As I said, that was, after 10 years, we said, wow, we're certain we're going to see this area blossom into something that's just going to be adorable and will attract a lot more people to our community. It hasn't happened. Now, when I look at this proposal, I see it as a case of misplaced priorities or misdirected priorities. Our priority should be making this beautiful downtown everything it can be. Now, we've had some small resources devoted to beautification of downtown, and those were really appreciated. Now, I take my hat off to you for doing that, but there's a lot more that could be done. Now, I personally like this building. I think that it's part of the infrastructure that a community should have. Whether it should have cost $3.7 million or more, that's Grimble, that's nothing, right? Well, so I'm asking that the priorities that you place on development and improvement of our community lie in two areas. First of all, I mentioned downtown. There's another glaring deficiency. When I have friends over, I'm embarrassed at what they see when they leave US 23 and enter Whitmore Lake. I live at exit 50. Everybody know what that looks like? There's now a nice sign at exit 50, but everything else is not quite nice. So I would ask that you please try to improve the impression that Whitmore Lake gives newcomers and visitors at each and every one of our entrances and exits from US 23. Those two things will go a long way towards changing the opinion that people have of this beautiful community and improving it incredibly. So instead of directing our resources toward high-density housing that's going to clog Whitmore Lake Road, which frankly is my only southern route to work at times, because 23 is too crowded to take, I ask that you please put your considerable expertise and resources to the two most important things that can improve Whitmore Lake: beautifying and improving the utility of downtown, and beautifying and improving the utility of our entrances and exit ramps on US 23. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? All right. Oh,
Jim Nelson, 7777 Sutton Road. I'm not going to use my notes. I'm just going to make an observation. The Biltmore proposal is basically planting a huge pile of money, huge pile of tax dollars in the Ann Arbor School District. As a lot of you know, they slapped us in the face last week. According to the information I read on the sewer system, you've got about 1,900 residential equivalent units of capacity available. 1,500 of those were reserved for the Special Assessment District around North Territorial, which is not being used. But that's the existing sewer system, and you've got a lot of space that's open for development around Whitmore Lake. Stuff around Dead Lake, or Wildwood Lake as it's called now. I mean, I know one of the members of the DDA is either 85 or 170 acres there, just waiting. The Van Curler property is waiting. The Johnson Controls property is waiting. And I don't know, I'm very nervous about backing a developer, which is what you do when you allow somebody to bond expensive changes to a sewer system. Because if they do it more slowly than you expect, you end up paying for it. If they walk away, you end up paying for it. The taxpayers end up paying for it, as Mike Chicella mentioned. And it just doesn't seem very conservative to me to be rolling the dice on somebody else's plans and schemes when the benefit actually goes to Ann Arbor. So I'm just being selfish. I think we should work together and figure out some way to develop around Whitmore Lake, like the previous gentleman said. And what makes me really nervous is I think Howard, our township manager, brought forth a proposal to develop, to build a meeting room in the far end of the building. But the architect he found, the firm folded up and fired the architect. That's how slow things are right now. That's how uneasy the situation is. I mean, we see that no change is happening around us, and the state is almost at a standstill. There's not much growth going on, maybe some in Ann Arbor in the tech areas, but these are very, very shaky times. You've got to be conservative with your money. You've got to think of the taxpayers.
All right, is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? I do want to thank Kim Phillips Knopp that sent a email to all of us. She wanted her letter to be read at the call to the public, but unfortunately, you have to be present for your voice to be heard. So sorry we won't be able to read your note, but thank you for sending it to us. And that takes us on to our next order of business, correspondence and announcements. Is there anything that anyone would like to share right now? Great. Let's just get right on to our reports. And updates from our department heads. Bill Wagner is going to be doing the police and fire reports this evening.
Thank you. Starting with the fire department report, the Northfield Township Fire Department responded to 52 requests for service in October 2014. This is about 5 more calls than October 2013 when we responded to 47. We had 9 fire calls, 8 motor vehicle crashes, and 32 medical responses. Of the fire calls, we had 1 wire down, 1 alarm, 1 gas leak, 6 smoke investigations, and 2 false alarms. Of the responses for the month, 63% went in the Hamlet area, 37% were in rural areas of the township, and there were 2 mutual aids in Hamburg Township. So for mutual aids, we assist other agencies 2 times and received assistance from agencies 2 times. The average response time for the month was 6 minutes and 10 seconds, and really the only one significant call we had was we assisted delivering a baby at the Shell station, actually right after the last board meeting. And it was a healthy baby boy, and mother and boy were both fine. Any questions from the board on fire?
Yeah, Wayne has one.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. I don't have it with me, but I read about some grant money that would be available for fire equipment and things like that.
I think you're, excuse me, I think you're probably speaking of the Assistance of Firefighter Grant?
Yes.
Which just opened from FEMA, and I did get a email from Trustee Otto on that also. Yeah, we participate in that every year, and we have received grants in the past. This year, we are actually not only participating for just Northfield Township Fire, but we're participating in 2 or 3 regional grants also. The FEMA seems to be funding the regional grants at a higher rate than individual fire departments. So we have our, like I said, we're going for several different areas in regional and then for our own department also.
Thank you. How about, is it political correct to say it's a boy like that? I mean...
I don't know, is it not? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That's one of the more cool things when it's successful that a firefighter or a police officer gets to do is participating in that. Any other questions on the fire? I'll go to the police report.
Sure.
The Northfield Township Police Department responded to 456 complaints during the month of October and handled 5 mutual aid responses inside the township and 5 outside the township. Of the total complaints answered, 59% of them were in the Hamlet area, 41% were handled out throughout the rest of the township. The average response time on calls was 5.72 minutes. Officers generated a total of 13 arrests. You have the itemized list attached. And then I do need a couple of approvals to sell 3 vehicles and purchase 1. Any questions?
Wayne, go ahead.
I see in the report that we have 2 officers that are, one's on light duty and one might be off, or how are they doing? Are they?
That by the end of next week, they'll both be back to full duty.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Actually, one of them already is, and one of them is released sometime this week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Bill, would you want us to make that motion now?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think we can do it in 2 separate motions. One motion to sell the 3 vehicles and then a separate motion to purchase the other vehicle.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to sell for the board to approve the sale of the police department vehicles, 2005 Dodge Dakota, 2003 Ford Taurus, and a 2012 Ford Explorer.
Otto motion and Thomas supported. Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, I'll make the motion for the police department to approve a request to purchase a new 2015 Chevy Tahoe from Champion Chevrolet at the cost of $34,534.10.
Where's the money coming from?
The money is coming out of the federal forfeiture funds.
I see some of it's coming from the sale of the 2 vehicles, is that correct?
Well, it can't work like that. The money that comes in has to go into a separate budget. The money that we're asking for here from the federal forfeiture was budgeted for in that line item in the federal forfeiture fund.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
Well, it's not like you can sell a vehicle and then take the money and put it in an expenditure line item. It has to come in on a revenue side, and then when you purchase, it's purchased on an expenditure line item. Is that correct, Mr. Fink?
Yes, it is.
Is all the money I mean, but the sale of the vehicles and other money is going to buy the equipment, is that right?
No, the money that it will come in for the sale of the vehicles will go into the revenue side, and the expenditures is already budgeted for out of the federal forfeiture drug fund. I know I keep saying that over and over, I'm just not sure how to say it a different way to make you understand.
No, I think the confusion comes because the report says that you plan on using the proceeds from the sale of the Dodge Dakota and the Ford Explorer to go toward the cost of the new vehicle, but that's incorrect.
Well, it's correct, but it comes in on the revenue side.
Yeah, it's correct. So if I may just jump in, as revenue increases, we amend the budget. So you don't just amend the budget on a revenue decrease side or an appropriation side, you amend the budget as well when significant revenues increase. And so for a particular sale of a vehicle, the finance law, municipal finance law, indicates that wherever that vehicle was purchased from, the proceeds has to go back into that revenue line or back into that fund. And so what Mr. Wagner is saying is that those revenues will be accounted for in that fund at some point. It's not to say that you'll use that exact, let's say it was a nickel. It's not to say that you'll use that exact nickel to buy that truck or to buy that car, but at some point, the revenue from the sale of the car will go back into the police department itself. And it'll be reflected at a later date, either in their fund balance or the ability for them to have a particular budget.
All right, we have a motion on the table from Otto. Engstrom will second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to know about the sale of the cars. I mean, you say you can only use the drug money to buy for certain things, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that to buy the new car?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the police?
All right, on to our next department head. Let's do the wastewater treatment plant. Tim?
I have nothing to add to the report unless there's any questions.
Anyone have anything for Tim? Wayne, go ahead.
Senegro, $25,570.
Yes, sir.
That's a very large expenditure. Can you, I see it in the bills. I don't see it in your information here, but I'm just wondering what that was for.
That was for sledge hauling for this year.
Okay. Did this go out for bids, sir, or do you just hire a company to do it?
It went out for bids 3 years ago for a 3-year contract.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Tim. On to our community center. Tammy?
The only addition I'd like to make is just to expand on the progress of the Meals on Wheels program. Howard and I have met with the representatives from Washtenaw County, and we are moving forward with it. Mr. Burns has the proposed contract, looking at that over, and we should have more for you at the next workshop. And that's it.
Any questions for Tammy?
Yes.
Wayne, go ahead.
I see it says here on your community service newsletter, closed October 11th, Veterans Day, closed on the 27th, 28th, Thanksgiving Day, closed December 23rd, I don't know why that is, closed 24th and 25th, that's Christmas, closed December 26th, I don't know why that is, December 29th, 30, and 31 closed. I'm just wondering why we're closed up for 4, 5, 6 days here.
I had talked to Howard about that so I could use some vacation time.
Okay.
That seemed to be the best time to close when we were in between the holidays and things were expected to be slow.
Okay, I just wondered because there was no holiday. I mean, there were several days here that you're going to be closed, so I didn't realize you were, I didn't see anything in the notes that you were on vacation. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Any other questions for Tammy? All right. Jackie, anything from the ZBA?
Yes. I have two things for the ZBA. One I do need to have a motion on. One is an announcement. Athena Trenton has resigned from the ZBA as of December 1st, I think it was. I couldn't find the letter, but she is moving out of state. We do appreciate the short time that she has been on the board, and we wish her well on her new endeavors. But with that said, there is an opening for this position, and I'm just requesting that we start our search and open it to the public, and the process of the appointment is started, so we have somebody on board for next year. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have to have one more board meeting for this year.
Yeah, by our bylaws, we have to have one more this year.
Okay. The next thing I wanted to bring to the board, in June, there was a ZBA board meeting, and the board approved a variance for a resident. The variance was to separate two parcels that was owned by one ownership. He requested that, he felt that this was an administrative function, that it really should not have been reviewed by the ZBA board. After Howard and I reviewed this with Pam, we did determine that that his request to have it reviewed by the ZBA and the fee that was that he had to pay was appropriate. He has now come back and asked for a discount. There are 2 months out of the year, I think February and August, that we provide a $500 discount. He is now requesting that $500 discount due to financial hardship. So I'm asking the board. This is something that I can't do myself or Howard can't do, so this is something that the board has to decide on. So I am going to make the motion, and I will let everybody know that I'm not supporting this, but I will make the motion that the Township Board apply a discount for Mr. Tim and giving him a $500 discount.
Support.
Out of motion and Docket supported. Any discussion?
It was $850.
And so we get 500.
Yes.
Did he show proof of hardship?
No, he hasn't.
Any other discussion? I'm sorry, I keep looking this way. All right, those in favor?
Roll call vote, please.
Roll call? Thomas?
Am I to understand that we're being asked to vote on something with no information in front of us on anything?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to abstain from that vote because I don't know what I'm voting on.
Jackie, do you want me to give more detail on that?
You can.
You
Go
want me
ahead.
to?
Give him the detail.
The two issues are effectively this. There's an old ordinance on the books, and I don't know it verbatim. So folks on the Planning Commission might know it a little better. Ken, you might be familiar with this ordinance better than I am of your time on the ZBA. There's an ordinance on the books that says if you have a house and it sits next to a vacant parcel of land, that you can't split off that vacant parcel of land, that it has to be, that it can't be split. You can't take the vacant parcel of land and split it off, right?
It has to do with non-conforming properties as well. And one of the properties is illegal non-conforming, and it happens to be the one where the residence is.
Right.
The other's a vacant lot.
All right, and so when Mr. Trim came into the office, there was an argument that could be made that this was really just a boundary adjustment. This was taking his house, making it a parcel, taking the vacant lot next door, making that another parcel, so he could effectively sell the house and keep the parcel separate from that. Pam interpreted the code correctly, indicating that that actually was a ZBA issue. Now, whether or not the ordinance gets changed later down the line and it becomes an administrative boundary adjustment is not the case today. And the case today is that in fact it was a ZBA issue. Pam did not have the authority, nor anybody in the office, the authority to make that essentially boundary adjustment. And so the case was brought to the ZBA. And then and I wasn't at that meeting, so I can't speak to the details of the total ZBA case, and can, as soon as I'm done, just chime in for any more details. So the case went to the ZBA, and there were a number that, essentially, there are a number of issues that were brought up at the ZBA, but the time at which the case went to the ZBA was about 3 or 4 months after the initial application had been put forth. So first, Brian had requested a discount because he felt as though it was an administrative issue, and Jackie and I and Pam met, and it's clear that that was not the case, and it was a valid charge. It's essentially the charge that a resident has to pay to go to the ZBA. Because the case ended up getting in front of the ZBA, coinciding with the same month that the discount would have happened, he's now requesting that that discount essentially be applied. And I do think that there is also a financial hardship as well, and I think ultimately that's why he is requesting this in a loud, or not loud, but that he's asking for this request.
Yeah, but one, Howard, the ZBA met in June, not August. And then 2, he's never done proof of hardship.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't have a position on this either. I mean, I'm with Jackie. I think it was a legitimate case to go to the ZBA, and it was a legitimate charge, and there was no administrative action that could be done in-house. But I just wanted to try to kind of round out the story, if you will. Ken?
Yeah, he came to us asking for a lot of things, and when we parsed through it, we determined what was necessary on our part and what was administrative. And the thing that was necessary on our part was giving him relief of our ordinance to allow him to split, to sell the parcel that was next to his house. He wanted to make a boundary adjustment, not to make the house conforming, but to make it less non-conforming. He wanted to add a little bit of more yardage to the house where the house is. We gave him the relief to allow him to be able to sell or do something else with that other parcel, build on it, sell it, or sell the house and build on it. Whatever he wanted to do, the parcels could be dealt with separately. The only way that was going to happen is in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. He didn't, yes.
Can I ask that we table this since it wasn't on our agenda? And I would really prefer to have some kind of backup information and something to look at before we vote on it. I really don't understand it without seeing it. Unless there's something.
Other than the ZBA notes, we don't have any other backup.
Maybe we could ask the resident for a letter outlining what his position is?
We could.
Do we have anything to say about the ZBA? I mean,
It's really the board to make that decision on.
Right.
You set fees.
Yeah, we either Jackie, nobody can change the fee. If in fact it went to the ZBA and it could have done administratively, then we would have done this administratively. I would have done this and waived the fee. Pam did not make a mistake. There was no mistake that occurred related to the fact that it needed to go in front of the ZBA. At that point, the fee is valid. So, I think that the real issue is now that now that we've established that the fee is valid, the real issue for him is either 1, the hardship, or 2, this issue that it was around the time of the discount I don't remember, I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know if it was in, it was in June.
I do
So,
have the minutes.
yeah, so.
Shall
those
I
are really the
rescind
two
my,
issues.
my support then? I mean, we're gonna,
Huh?
we're gonna back off in,
Well,
or,
what we could do is, we can just,
huh?
Paul, do we rescind our motion?
If there's a motion to table, it trumps the motion. So if you vote on the motion to table, it tables it.
Okay. Anybody supporting? Okay.
Chick motion to table the motion. Chick motioned to table the motion, and Braun supported. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
We can put it on our next agenda.
Jackie, anything else on the ZBA?
No, that is it.
Okay, great. Let me see. Well, we have the Planning Commission here. Is there anything that?
It's real quick. I'm sorry.
Yes, I wonder why we're paying $700 to have the planning commission here when I don't, they can't vote on anything, and they don't have anything to say about
We
this.
can vote. We have a quorum if we vote on anything.
Why are we
Till we
paying?
get the sewer capacity report.
To learn and understand the sewer system
To learn, we're not gonna learn anything from the planning commission, are we?
Oh, well, Wayne, we'll talk about that later. We're on the Planning Commission report right now.
Okay, Planning Commission met November 5th. We received notice that Scioto Township and Green Oak are revising their master plans. We held public hearings on 6 items. All will be coming before the board for approval. 4 are article changes. One is a request for conditional use to allow a cell tower on a property at Sutton Road. The other is for a new article, 53.0, the Whitmore Lake North Territorial Overlay District, which we have been working on for several months.
Any questions for Janet? All right, let's move on to the Parks and Rec Department. Tracy, you got anything tonight?
Nothing that's not in the township manager's report. Thanks.
Okay, great. And Kathy, thanks for the financial report. Is there anything that you would like to add or anything? Okay. Township manager report. Howard, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Not unless anybody has any questions.
Wayne, do you have a question?
I have several.
Okay.
Okay. He's got on here about the Downtown Development Corporation. I will not be here for the December 9th meeting, but as one board member, I would side with the police and fire department. When development comes to the township, the police and fire department will need the extra revenue to give the services to the area. That is on that part of it. On the Meals on Wheels, Howard, you said the county would be paying $20,000 for Meals on Wheels. Tammy said the volunteers would be delivering Meals on Wheels at no cost. That was then. Now, Tammy and Howard are working to identify needed budget line items for the program. Now the county will help subsidize the program. What happened to the county paying for the entire Meals on Wheels, Howard?
Everything is true. The county is going to provide a $20,000 budget. We have to identify what that budget is and stick within that budget. That's why we're working to create the budget, of which most of the monies will be allocated for administrative support for the program, and other ancillary issues like kitchen supplies and permits that are necessary. But the county is still committed to that $20,000 number, and we're working on the budget.
And is it going to run over $20,000?
What's that?
Is it going to be more than $20,000?
I can't say, Mr. Dockett.
Is the township,
I can't speak to that. We haven't implemented the program.
well, at one time you said that, well, that they were going to handle it, it wasn't going to cost us anything, that's all I'm saying. Now it looks like it's changing.
There's nothing that's changed. I've given no misinformation on this issue. There's a $20,000 allotment. We believe that that is going to be plenty of money to implement the program. I think Tammy would agree to that. To answer your question of what ifs, Mr. Dockett, we've not done this before, so I can't speak to all of the particulars, and we haven't created the budget yet to know what that $20,000 makeup is going to be, other than we definitely know that the vast majority of that $20,000 will be for to hire somebody to help coordinate this program.
Okay.
That does not preclude volunteers from doing meals delivery. Now, it also does not preclude that if we don't have volunteers for meals delivery, that the person that is hired could do some of those deliveries when we're getting short on volunteers or so on and so forth. There'd be mileage that will be built into that budget, a number of issues.
Well, you don't have to go on and on. What it says here is to help subsidize the effort. That is my question. Why do you have to help subsidize the effort in your report? I mean, it sounds like we're going to be paying, which originally we weren't, so that's why I'm asking the question.
Another mystery amount X that the township is paying out of the general fund. In other words, like the township's going to pay 20,000 subsidy, some 20,040. That's the docket.
No.
We're going to try to stick to the 20,000 budget.
Correct.
Under snow plowing, the township was late with the bid last year also, and the township is late this year. I just wondered, we ended up with 3 bids, and it says you have that information, but we don't have it. I'm wondering, how did we get the 3 companies to vote? I mean, how did we advertise this?
We made phone calls, and in addition, we put it out on a website called Mitten, which sends it out to everyone who's registered for bids under the Mitten system. It's a state of Michigan bidding system.
And last but not least, under your health insurance plan, do you want me to talk about that now or at the insurance, when we do the insurance?
Why don't we talk about that when we're talking on that subject, okay?
Well, it's in his report also, so I just wanted to figure out when, because I have questions about that. Thank you.
All right, anyone else have anything for Howard? Okay. Before we get on to our agenda items, jump the gun here a little bit, I need to move back up to the consent agenda. We need a motion for the minutes and bills.
I'd like to have the minutes and bills pulled.
Okay.
And I would like to have them 3 and 4 before we get into the sewer capacity thing. I've only got a couple things on it. I don't want to put it down on the very end of the meeting if...
That's fine. The agenda item, so we need to amend it to put 3 as minutes, 4 as bills.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Support.
Those in favor?
Aye.
I'll need another motion to adopt the balance of the modified agenda.
I'll make a motion to adopt the balance of the modified agenda.
I'll support. Chick motion, Engstrom supported. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, sorry about that, you guys. On to our agenda items. Number 1, health insurance.
Okay.
Madam Supervisor, should I give a brief summary?
Yes, please.
And it's going to be brief because I know we want to get to the issue of sewer capacity. In my management report, and I will just emphasize this, I know that this is not going to be a popular recommendation of the whole board, or popular recommendation from me of some board members, but I am recommending that the board remove the hard caps from the equation for this upcoming year's insurance. The results of the Affordable Care Act and not just the Affordable Care Act, but the way that the Affordable Care Act was implemented related to age banding, the results of that process has significantly increased insurance costs for the township. What we have come to realize this year is that the hard caps do not match up with the cost of health insurance in today's marketplace. So what I am suggesting that the board do is, one, remove the hard caps from this year's equation. I'm also recommending that the board choose two plans, the silver HSA and the bronze HSA. Third, I'm recommending that the board increase approximately $40,000 to the health insurance pool in addition to the hard caps. And that will allow us to fund the HSAs for a family of roughly 5,000, a couple of roughly 3,300, and a single of roughly 1,650 in the silver plan. And in the bronze plan, the HSA would, for a family, would be maxed out at 6,550, and for we're not going to have any couples in the bronze HSA plan, and for a single it would be 3,350. I realize that this is a vast departure from what we have done in the past. I have run the numbers every which way. I don't know how else to provide both the administrative employees and the police department decent health insurance, and grant you, if you increase the $40,000, it would be good health insurance, to do this any other way. The way we had this structured under the hard caps, the numbers just came out that some employees would be forking out, in the neighborhood of potentially $12,000 for health insurance. I've tried to meet with all of the board members to kind of go over the details and specifics. That's my recommendation. I know Jack Smith is in the audience. I just asked Jack to just share a few words as to what your thoughts are, and then open it up for questions.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Howard. Yeah, this is going to come and share. Howard asked me to field any questions on that. What other townships are doing. I think he had asked me on that prior. Really, with my townships, I work with all municipalities, but with my townships, I would honestly say that about 90% are opting out of Public Act 152. They're not going with the hard caps. They're not going with the 80-20. So I know he had asked me to kind of share with him without mentioning names, but all townships throughout Michigan, most are opting out because there is no penalty to them. And the Affordable Care Act, as he's mentioned, has increased the cost. It has. We talked about this last time. I won't go through the plan designs unless you guys have specific questions about that. But due to the age banding, it is hitting municipalities harder than it is the private sector because there is a more mature age on average. So I guess I would just answer if there's any specific questions on as far as insurance or what I see out there.
I don't have any. Does anyone over here?
I have questions to Howard on this.
Okay.
According to his report, Howard, your memo of 11/6/14, you are trying to come up with a solution that will be fair to all employees of Northfield Township. That's what you say in your memo. But you said nothing about being fair to the taxpayers of Northfield Township. There are lots of taxpayers in Northfield Township that have no insurance for themselves or for their families, none. But you want them to pay more for township employees' insurance. Howard, you are recommending to the township board to remove the hard caps and provide approximately $40,000 more tax money for the employees' insurance package. That's about $40,000 divided by 8 full-time employees is $5,000 for each employee. You did not mention that you are one of these employees. I mean, I know you're supposed to give us recommendations, but when you're giving recommendations to fatten your own insurance policy, I think you should tell us what you're doing.
Mr. Dockett,
Yes.
I think you're out of line.
Well, maybe you do, but I'll finish. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to
You
interrupt
did
you.
not, you did not mention that you are one of the employees that will get more money. Howard, you said in your manager's report that that we should have a conversation about this, about appropriating funding. I think we should have had that before we talked about this. Thank you.
I agree. I think that next year we all need to sit down and really have some more detailed conversations about what, not the cost. Obviously, the cost is a critical equation, but what the board feels is an appropriate level of coverage, and then back into the numbers and see where they land. Mr. Dockett, the first part of your question, I think you're out of line. And the first part of your comment, number one, I am highly considering removing myself from the township insurance, thus saving the township approximately $14,000.
Well, you didn't say that in...
Well, but Mr. Dockett, that is my personal issue. It is none of the, with all due respect, it is not of the business of the board. I've now made it public, but it is also not of the business of the public. It is my personal life that you are now talking about. And to say that I am making a recommendation to fatten my own pocketbook is inappropriate.
Well, you have a
With
right
all
to
due
your
respect,
opinion. You have a right to your opinion.
I really respect your opinion, Mr. Dockett, and I want to hear it. And you have an absolutely valid point with respect to we have to have more conversation about this health insurance over time and create a plan that we can all live with that's more sustainable.
Well, most places are not adding.
I would just ask
adding the
that
insurance. Most places are taking away benefits.
I understand.
Not adding $5,000.
I would just ask that it not get personal.
Well, are you adding $5,000 per person?
First of all, we have more than 8 people on the plan. We have probably 20,
Well, how do you get
19
that,
on the
Howard?
plan.
No.
And
No.
I don't know where you're coming up with the number 8, Mr. Dockett. We have
Well, there's
19
5 at the sewer plant, and there's 3 at this office.
No, Mr. Dockett.
That comes
We're
to 8.
talking about $40,000 for both the police department and the administrative employees in total.
Wayne, did you have anything else?
Well, the police department's covered under a union. I didn't realize they had anything to do with this. They're covered under their union.
Yes, please.
Howard, this approximate $40,000, the distribution that you put out is for these individuals on this particular packet, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
would
it's-
just like to point out that within that $40,000 that's distributed here, I don't see Howard and his wife or family on this list. So it's not fair to attack him for taking a personal,
As far as I know, he's on the insurance right now.
but he is not configuring himself in this.
Well, I didn't know that. He came, when did you get this information? I didn't get anything until 3 o'clock this afternoon, which I haven't had time to look at.
Mr. Dockett, we can't, this is a violation.
We're supposed
This is
to have it
an
on-
absolute
supposed to have it on Thursday.
Mr. Dockett, I'm sorry, this is a HIPAA violation. This is a HIPAA legal violation, and I would request that you refrain from talking about specific individuals and specific issues related to health insurance.
I did not get the information today.
It doesn't
until
matter
3
whether you
o'clock.
got the information today, Mr. Dockett. This is a clear HIPAA violation that's going on right now.
All right, anyone else?
We need 3 separate motions? Yeah. I'll make a motion to remove the hard caps. I'm not sure exactly, I'm sorry, how to word that, though. What else do you need in that motion?
What's that, trustee?
I wanted to make a motion to remove the hard,
Yeah, that would be the first motion. Just to, Mr. Schmitz? Yeah, so the motion is to opt out of Public Act 152.
okay. I make a motion, excuse me, to opt out of Public Act 152. Sorry.
I'll support. Chick motion, Ingstrom supported. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
The second motion that we would need, and we have yet to get to the $40,000 issue, but the second motion is just to choose the 2 plans. I'm recommending to the board that we choose the silver HSA and bronze HSA.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve the 2 plans, the silver HSA and they're both PPOs, PPO HSA silver and the PPO HSA bronze.
Adam motioned and Westover supported. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
Need a motion to approve the funding of $40,000, okay. I'll make a motion to approve $40,000 from the general fund to fund the cost of medical insurance for the administrative staff of Northfield Township
And police.
and police.
Also, Chick motioned, Westover supported. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
One more motion, if you don't mind. The last and final motion would be to fund, because again, as people go on the plan and off the plan, it changes the numbers. So that's why earlier when I said what we really need to do is sit down and have a conversation about not the number first, because we're doing this backwards. We're saying what the limit is, and that's really kind of a backwards way of doing this. What we need to do is sit down and say, what do you believe is appropriate health insurance coverage for your employees, and then figure out what those numbers are. And that way we can have a more appropriate level conversation. And for that matter, we can start comparing things like plans that you guys have in your own work lives or your own personal lives to our employees, and we can have a apples and apples comparison conversation as opposed to what we're doing today, which, you know, is not anybody's fault, but it's just where we're at. So what I'd like to ask is that the board also indicate that for, and as the numbers stand right now, we're actually going a little bit lower, meaning we'll save a little bit money if nobody changes their plan. But if somebody decides, me for example, or anybody else for that matter, decides, nope, they're going to go on the township's plan, then the numbers will shift. So what I'm asking is that the board accept that under the silver HSA, that the HSA will be funded at least $5,000 for a family, $3,300 for a couple, and $1,650 for a single, and that under the bronze HSA, it's $6,550 for a family and $3,350 for a single.
Is that per month, Howard?
No, that's per year, Mr. Dockett.
So do the silver one again.
The silver one would be at least $5,000 for a family, at least $3,300 for a couple, I hope I got my numbers right, and at least $1,650 for a single. And on the bronze, the family would be, the max actually is $6,550 and for a family, and there would be no couple in the bronze, and for the single it'd be $3,350. And those are at leasts. And Jackie, if you, I can just give you my numbers if you want.
Yeah, I got them, but is that the out-of-pocket max that you're talking about?
Well, so the way these works, these high deductible HSAs work, is you buy the cheapest insurance that you can, and then you take the leftover money and you fund it back into employees' HSAs.
Okay.
And so in the bronze HSA, just for folks in the audience, the deductible is $8,000 and $12,000. So, and there is no copays. Like for those of us, for those who are on Medicare, they go to the doctor, it costs them $20. There is no copays in these HSA plans. It's all out-of-pocket expense. You pay 100% of your pills, prescriptions. You pay 100% of everything until you reach certain thresholds. Under the bronze threshold, I think it's $8,000 for the thirst threshold, and under the silver threshold, it's $5,000. So what we're saying is you buy the cheapest insurance you can, you take the money, you give it to the employees in their HSA account, and then they can draw from that HSA account to pay their insurance. And when you add it all up, it's basically like having a plan where you have traditional copays and so on and so forth, but you can carry over those HSA monies from year to year. And so there's really a significant tax benefit to this. And so that's why the HSA funding is really significantly important. And it's built into these spreadsheets. It's not additional to the 40.
Just trying to figure out how to say those.
Oh, okay. Well, let me, sorry.
Because it is
complicated. So I had 3,300 singles, so that's silver. And then that number right there and that number right there.
Oh, okay. This is the part that I needed to say. I know the numbers.
Yeah. I just don't.
Oh, you mean for a couple?
Yeah, I would just say that the bronze is, it would just make it so that yeah, between the two or under the bronze, you really got to max it out because you have so much money left over under the bronze because the deductible's so high. So you could just.
Okay. So I will, just to understand this pain, because I am in insurance and I do understand this is very painful to understand all these changes that we've been going through. So I'm going to make the motion to fund. Let's start with the silver. For the silver plan, I'm going to make the motion to fund the HSA account for a family at $5,000, a couple at $3,300, and single at $1,650.
At least.
At minimum.
At minimum.
That's the motion.
That's the motion. I will support it. Otto motioned and Engstrom supported. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
Okay, so for the bronze plan, I need approval to fund the HSA account at minimum of $6,500 for family and $3,550 for single.
Otto motioned and Engstrom supported. Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I know this was tough. It was not popular. I get it. I'm not going to be the most popular person tomorrow. But I would like to start having this conversation earlier this time. I'd be happy if, even if we wanted to set up a little subcommittee, if you will, for folks that are interested in having this conversation, and really get a sense of where we want to be and what our policy is kind of moving forward.
I think we should have had the information last Thursday.
Great. That takes us to our next agenda items, which is the tax tribunal case. I'd like to make a motion to approve the negotiated settlement regarding tax tribunal number 14-005631.
Support.
Engstrom motioned and Chick supported. Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Wayne, we're on to number 3, which is the minutes.
Some of the minutes, we had quite a few problems with the minutes, but I think most of them have been corrected from what I can see here, except for number 6. Is it number 6? Let me see. It's on, yeah, under 6. I'm sorry. 7. Under 7. I don't think this has been corrected. Motion auto moved, man supported. Who is man?
Yeah, it's corrected. What, yeah, are you looking at the corrected version
Well,
that we need to
I thought-
approve tonight?
I thought it was. I see where it says, under 2, it says auto and Enscrim, and then it says no one here. This is on page 2, but on page 3, under 7, it says, where it says, motion carried 5-2, Docket and Engstrom, oh, no, I'm sorry, just above that. Motion auto move, man supported. What,
It just needs to be a proper name. I can look it up, or you can tell me.
I mean, it wasn't, most of it was corrected, but that's not corrected, is it?
No, it is, the correction is, I believe, correct when it's no one versus you have man in there. It should have been
No, not on that one, not on that one. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about under 7, under the number 7.
Motion in number 7, we have to look up who supported it, or someone can tell me.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know that name. Yeah, so I'm confused.
Fill her name for now because he doesn't know.
Well, that's fine, but I mean, this was supposed to be the corrected version of the thing, wasn't it? And then...
I think it needs to be tabled until we have the corrected
I
person in
don't,
that.
they automatically are voted, I mean, are passed within 7 days, so it's not a big deal. And then I'm a little bit confused on, it says that, I said that that's on the same one, just down a little ways. I said that Earl should be able to keep material on a site, and other members said the same thing. So I'm wondering what we voted on there. On this one, yeah. It says Docket and Enscrim opposed. I don't know what we opposed.
engaging residents to move forward with
The lawsuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So this is just the outcome of that motion.
Okay. Well, other people said the same thing. Thank you.
No, but this is the actual.
Does anyone know?
Can anyone recall who was the supporter of that motion? Oh, okay. Yeah, no one's yet. Sure.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the Northfield Township Board of Trustees meeting for October 28, 2014, as amended.
I'll support. Chick motioned, Engstrom supported. Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Go ahead. I make a motion to approve the minutes from the Northfield Township special meeting of September 23, 2014.
I'll support. Chick motioned, Engstrom supported. Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. On to number 4, the bills. Wayne, what you got?
There was several things here on page 2, page 3, about halfway down, it says PNC Bank Repair and Maintenance, $815. What would be repair and maintenance at PNC Bank? What would that be about? Does anyone know? I tried to check on this stuff, but the office was closed and so on and so forth. I didn't get it done.
I'm not seeing where he's talking about. Page 2?
Page 3. Then there's another PNC Bank late payments. When I see these late fees and penalties, I'm wondering if we're doing something wrong with our bookkeeping. I don't know.
Oh, you know what? PNC Bank is probably, thank you. PNC Bank is the credit card, and that $850 is probably a water heater for the senior center.
Oh, okay.
The late fees and penalties, yeah, you see them, but they're actually negative, so it means the amount was taken away.
Okay.
So you see negative $78, negative $43.
Thank you, Howard.
You're welcome.
Page 6, PNC, down towards the end, membership dues.
Yeah,
$105. What's
when
that?
you see PNC Bank, it's somebody used a credit card.
Okay.
So the membership,
Okay,
so-
excuse me, Howard, but it
Yeah.
seems like they could just put CC on the thing. I mean, give us some idea what it,
Yeah, we could try to do that.
what it is. Creative Cars, 1,000, that's on page 7, about halfway down, $1,094. Repair and maintenance. The reason I ask about these, because I want to know if there's a crash or something. I mean, did a police car get in a wreck or, when I see this $1,000. Do you know anything about that?
It was actually a fire vehicle. It was not a crash. It was
Okay.
suspension issues on a very old utility vehicle.
Thank you. A little bit further down, I'm seeing Northeastern Uniform, $1,352. The next page is, it says PNC Bank, but it says Uniform and Gear, $1,200. I'm just wondering.
Those are all uniforms for the fire department.
Well, it seems like quite a bit of money. We're at the plant department, oh yeah, that 25,000 I already asked about. Thank you. That's all I got on that.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. I'll make a motion to approve the bills. Engstrom motion, Chick supported. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay. On to our joint session with the Planning Commission. And thank you guys for sitting through our first portion of our meeting. But just for everyone watching, this joint meeting with the Planning Commission is to learn and understand the sewer capacity of Northville Township and plan for any possible future development. Tonight's meeting is not about a particular development. It's about understanding what we have and understanding it fully. How do you want to get started tonight? You want to get jump on in, and do you have a presentation prepared, or just questions, or how are you?
I prepared a brief memo a couple weeks ago. I intended today to maybe just give you a 5-minute summary of some of the key points and be available for questions at that point. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think that's where I'll get to first. The township to my knowledge, has not prepared a comprehensive master plan for sewers in the recent past, but I think we can piece together various clues and facts and paint a fairly comprehensive picture of where you are. So that's what I'm going to intend to do here this evening. And Tim may help me before we're done tonight, fill in some gaps. But you have a three-stage wastewater treatment plant process, very modern, very comparable to many communities, what you have and the level of treatment that you provide. The permit that you have, you're required to obtain a permit to discharge to a lake or stream. The permit allows you to discharge up to a daily average of 1.3 million gallons per day. That's a unit of flow. And the permit actually anticipated an expansion at some point and has provisions for you to go up to 3.0 million gallons per day when and if you choose to add flow to your community. I'll talk a little bit about the dry weather conditions. It really is important to look at both dry weather and wet weather to assess how the plant is performing. And I'll get to the wet weather in just a second. It may become more clear why that is something we look at. Your daily flow averages about somewhere between 600,000 gallons a day and 700,000 gallons a day. And comparing that to the 1.3 million gallon per day capacity of the plant, or permitted capacity of the plant, there is a surplus there that would allow you to continue to add customers during dry weather conditions. And the calculations that I performed would indicate that you could add about 1,900 residential equivalent units, or REUs. And that term is equivalent to like a single family home is one REU. It's just a way to translate this million gallons per day capacity to something a little bit more tangible, like homes. So on the surface during dry weather, you would have capacity to add 1,900 homes or equivalent businesses that would add the same amount of flow as homes, of 1,900 homes. It's also important, as I indicated a minute ago, to look at the wet weather capacity of your plant. And unfortunately, sewer systems aren't perfectly, no sewer system is perfectly sound. There are cracks or defects that develop. Even your customers can connect fixtures that collect stormwater like downspouts into sanitary sewers. So all sewer systems do have a response during wet weather. The flow does go up everywhere. It's just a matter of, in some communities it goes up more than others. And newer systems, generally it goes up much less than older systems. And your system is roughly, parts of it are 50 plus years old. Most of your system was put in the 1970s, so 35 to 40 years is the average age of your collection system. So it does show some response to wet weather. And again, this chart just was my attempt to show a picture of what happens during wet weather. This is just a simple chart of flow rate into the plant, and this is time over here. And this just represents rainfall, and there's no particular numbers on this, I just wanted to show a general trend. So during dry weather, you have a lower flow, probably at 0.6 or lower. And then as the rain occurs, the flow does increase. And as the rain stops, the flow will stay high. It can stay high for a day or two before it really starts to go back to normal conditions. And I just put a couple of lines on here. Again, your baseline is somewhere around 0.6 to 0.7. The plant should be able to handle that 1.3 pretty steadily and treat it, meet all of your permit standards. And Tim has actually observed it up to 3 million gallons per day for a short period of time, several hours on end. He treats, he and I have spoken about this couple times. He treats the wastewater pretty good until he starts reaching about 2 million gallons per day as a rate. And then it becomes more challenging for him to push all the water through the plant and meet the standards. In particular, I think your filter is one of your constraints right now, and he and I have talked, and that may be an improvement down the road that would help free that up. But somewhere between two, the design calculations I reviewed indicate that you should be able to treat about 2.5 perhaps for a short period of time and still meet your limits and push the water through the plant and receive treatment. Ms. Otto?
Usually when it gets up that high, are you talking like heavy rains?
Heavy rains.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
To where we're almost flooding or we are flooding?
Flooding would be, you mean standing water around the area?
Well, when we have heavy rains, it floods.
Okay.
Like the lakes start flooding and everything.
I think we're talking rains of several inches.
Okay.
Is that about right, Tim? Okay. Okay. So there is some concern as I look at it about how your plant does perform during wet weather. You've met your permit limits for the most part, which has been great. At 2, though, Tim is really challenged, and he does have to bypass some of the processes. Not all of the processes, but just some of them. And but thus far, he's still been able to meet all of his permits. So there is some concern about capacity during the wet weather as perhaps you added more customers. And I can't tell you, there's always room for one more. There's always room for 2 more. Exactly what point he would have some problems meeting the permit, I just threw out a number in the memo that, to me, you get to about 100 homes, that starts to have a measurable flow rate at the plant, something that you're going to be able to say, hey, things have changed here. I have more than I had before. 1 or 5 or 10 are almost lost with the bigger flow coming in. But somewhere around 100, to me, you're going to start to see a measurable change.
And this is only for wet weather events? Correct?
Only for wet weather. Only for wet weather. Now,
one quick question. That's based on the current observations of, let's say, the last 2 years?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, I'll come back to that. Thank you.
And when you say wet weather, how many days per year out of, say, 365 does that actually happen?
Tim, you're probably the better call of that.
It changes every year. I mean,
So what was it last year?
last year probably, I'm guessing maybe a week to a week and a half, we had significant flows like that.
So 10 days out of 365? Just so I can understand it. That's
Recollect right now, yes.
okay.
No, I just recall that we had on one of our reports from the wastewater treatment plant that there was one instance this year that it did get to overflow a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the township has known about wet weather flow. All collection system owners know about wet weather flow. It affects everybody to some level. It's been kind of a long-term plan, on and off, to build a storage basin at your plant. Your plant does not have a storage basin. Basically, everything that comes at the plant, Tim needs to get to treatment right away. Many facilities have a storage tank built there to help with these fluctuations in flow. I would say 50+% of the plants have such a thing. So it's been a long-term vision to have a storage tank at the Northfield Township wastewater plant. In fact, I have records as far back as 1988 that that was almost implemented and was not. Yes.
Explain what a storage tank does exactly.
Yes, I can probably do it visually here. This shaded area is what a storage tank would help accommodate. So we said that Tim can treat 2 to 2.5 pretty well. So when the flow gets above that amount, the storage tank would then keep that water there so that when the flow starts to recede, this water that's stored would be sent back to the treatment process.
Okay. Because you mentioned that, and as I look at the things that you just talked about, so above peak rates of 2 million gallons a day, we do have times where we may have to bypass certain processes.
Correct.
Okay. Are we talking about a 500,000 gallon tank? What kind of capacity do these tanks typically run in a community of our size? And in addition to that, you talked about a significant impact being 100 homes. Well, over the last 2 years, we have 120 units that will have homes on them that haven't been contributing to flow. We have 120 units at a manufactured home community here that 100 of them have been vacant land, and 20 to 40 of them have been vacant buildings. So if those currently come up to capacity as they were 3, 4, 5 years ago, that 100 home capacity that you're talking about is going to put us at a risky area of having potential environmental discharge that we don't desire? Is that, I mean, I don't expect you to say yes. You know, I understand you can't say yes or no, but you know, it just seems to me that if we're, you know, if 100 homes are having that impact and we've got 120 to 140 that haven't been contributing to the sewer flow in 2 years, we got an issue.
There's no doubt that maybe Tim's 7 to 10 days on an average, well, last year might be 10 to 15 then if you have more growth occurring, more customers connecting or occupying existing homes, for instance. So
at what point does it become an environmental issue from the state standpoint? When you reach those kind of capacities where you do have to bypass certain treatment processes, and I understand it might be a final treatment process or something of that sort, where does it become a regulatory issue?
When they know about it. If you had a violation of your effluent at the plant because you had just so much water you couldn't effectively treat it, and Tim could not meet those limits, they would start paying more visits to him and asking for a commitment to do something. You have not gotten to anywhere close to that point.
Okay.
In your report, it also says, and the reason I'm saying it is because I want to make sure I am or I'm not understanding it properly. It says Tetra-Tech believes Northfield Township could add up to 1,900 REUs prior to MDEQ requesting wastewater treatment plant to be expanded.
That's correct.
But here you're saying 100.
Okay. And again, it's a difference. I'm separating dry weather conditions and wet weather conditions in my head. If you had a mechanism to accommodate this wet weather, I think you could add 1,900 homes. If you kept the status quo during wet weather, I am concerned about your ability to continue to meet these limits above, say, 100 homes. And it's maybe it's 70, maybe it's 150, but it's somewhere in that range.
I'm seeing that the permit allows for a discharge of 1.3 million gallons, but you're saying that he can handle up to 2.5 million gallons. So we're beyond the permit anyway?
The permit of 1.3 is written as an average day. The 2 to 3 that we're observing is a peak time, a few hours of a single wet weather day.
Okay, so you're averaging everything. Well, what about this, the provision for expansion to 3 million? That would be an average.
That would be an average.
Okay, but that would require building more capacity into the treatment
Yeah,
plant.
you'd almost double the plant that you have, yes.
Right, which is a lot of money. Right, so the 1,900 that you're mentioning on the second page here, 1,900 additional, that's only in dry weather. We'd have to have a massive storage capability to handle that amount of additional in wet weather, and then it mentions the need to construct an expansion of the treatment plant.
Well, that was a separate project discussed in 2005. To me, if you wanted, let's say you wanted to add 1,900 new customers, you could do that with your existing plant. It would require you to build a storage facility.
Okay, that's not how I read this, but go ahead. Yes, I understand the,
Okay.
doing the storage tank.
Mr. Dockett.
I did not read every word of this, but, you know, I read your report, and I see nothing in here that tells me what commitments we have to Green Oak, what commitments we have to North Territorial, what commitments we have to 7 Mile Road, what commitments we have to the other sewer, I mean, the new Whitmore Lake Road, for instance. I mean, what would happen if we have these commitments? I mean, I don't have any idea what kind of a commitment we got with Green Oak. So,
As well as Hamlet.
excuse me?
As well as Hamlet.
Well, whatever, yeah, I mean, I have no idea, and I lived through a moratorium here 15, 18, 20 years ago, where nobody could build anything because we were right at capacity. That's when we were being sued back in the 80s, I think, from Hamburg. But with all this information, I don't see how, I mean, I didn't see anything in your report. Do you have any idea what our commitments are to, that we already committed to?
I personally have only seen a single document that committed 200,000 gallons to Green Oak Township.
How many REUs is that? You mean?
Yeah, I did.
And are we to that capacity there? I mean,
It's about 740 REUs.
okay. And are they using them, do you know?
They're using some of those. They would have to be calculated on how much of that is used.
Yeah, well, like I said, we have certain commitments. I think that'd be a place to start.
Others may have, I know there was a search, Mr. Burns did a search. I only saw that one.
Yeah, the number's 250 to Green Oak Township, and Mr. Burns can go over the legal commitments related to that.
How about North Territorial, and how about Whitmore Lake Road, and how about 7 Mile Road? Does he have that too?
Do you wish me to address North
Yes.
Territorial? I think North Territorial is a policy matter of the board myself. You do have a special assessment district there. The assessment paid for the sewer in front of their house. The connection fee, which is paid at the time of development, is what pays for the wastewater treatment plant capacity. So to me, it's a board decision whether that special assessment district has the commitment of wastewater service that has to be reserved above everybody else, or it's just something that you need to provide at the time of demand. I don't believe, I think that's something the board has to decide.
Can I ask a question on that then? So when they tap in is when they pay that fee.
That is correct.
That tap-in fee, when was the last time the board set a tap-in fees? And can they be different in different SADs?
3650, isn't it?
3550, I think.
3550 or 36.
I mean, you take and multiply that tap-in fee out to what the 1,500, or, I'm sorry, we're using 1,400 REUs are down in that North Territorial SAD. Question is does that cover the costs of what would be necessary, or an overwhelming majority of that cost to do what would be necessary to handle that capacity? If it doesn't, you guys need to look at the sewer tap-in fees. And I don't know if different tap-in fees can be different by different SADs. If they can, maybe that, the relevance of that needs to be looked at.
No, they can't be. I mean, it's the same, and right now it's the same.
Right now it's the same everywhere in the township. Yep.
this times this.
Were there other questions? I made about halfway through my memo.
Yeah, and so this is just your wet, right? So you want to talk about dry then, or go on with your presentation, I'm sorry.
I think I talked about dry and wet.
Okay. Any other details? Wayne had mentioned, what we have already committed to in those districts.
Mr. Burns, I think, knows the commitments better than I do.
Right. Well, Paul, do you have just the Green Oak ones, or? I think Wayne was trying to say that, the people that have already paid their sewer assessment, they're not using it.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, while Paul's looking up the information on the commitments and the legal issues and kind of getting his part of the presentation prepared, if you will, why don't you kind of continue going through your memo and kind of get to the North Territorial part and how this all plays in to the bigger picture.
Absolutely. So I think what I've spoken up to now is just an overview of the plant capacity. And the only other information I really have is regarding the North Territorial Special Assessment District. And we may or may not need that graphic. The North Territorial Special Assessment District was planned in the 1990s. I believe the construction of the district was in 2000. And the key elements of the construction were a collection sewer in and around North Territorial Road, just east of US 23, a little bit to the west. It's roughly this green area is the Special Assessment District and the parcels that paid for these improvements. Again, it consisted of a collection sewer, a pump station at the northeast corner of US 23 and North Territorial, and a very long force main in the US 23 right-of-way up to the 8 Mile Road pump station. That was primarily the project. Get wastewater collected here up to the 8 Mile Road pump station, upon which it's lifted to the wastewater treatment plant. These facilities were sized, as they exist today, primarily for the present district. There was negligible surplus capacity built into the current infrastructure to accommodate growth of that special assessment district. It was conceived that should there be growth demands, then improvements could be made. A new pump could be added to the existing pump station, and a second force main running parallel to the existing one could be built to accommodate this district should it grow. But as it exists right now, it's largely sized for the special assessment district as it was established in 2000.
Okay, so hypothetical. If we had any additional growth in that area, how would that impact that pumping station?
Yeah. Right now, because the growth has been so sparse here, you could add a substantial number of connections without building something today. But you would be using capacity that this special assessment district paid for. So to accommodate growth, you would need to somehow invest for an improvement. Whether you built that today or you put money away to build it in the future, but either way, a growth there would need to invest in an improvement.
I have a question, and this was brought up earlier in the call to the public. Is an expansion cost of the wastewater treatment plant shared by all taxpayers or those only that are utilizing the system?
I think that's something for the board to decide how to pay for.
What happens in other communities? That's my question.
I think the growth would pay for it at some point, whether it's immediately or as the connection fees came in. But the growth would generally pay for it.
Okay, so in other communities, not every, because again, a lot of our rural area doesn't utilize the wastewater treatment
Right.
plant. The Hamlet area does. And so, in a typical expansion in other communities, are those that utilize the wastewater treatment plant and are already paying sewer bills, are they the only ones that are usually hit with an increase, or is it shared by all in a community?
No, a utility fund is established, and the rates that people pay for the fund's expenses, or connection fees that people pay for the fund's expenses.
So the ones that utilize
That's correct.
the wastewater treatment plant
That's
are the
correct.
ones that usually pay for the expansion?
That's correct.
And not ones that don't? Because that, to me, that's important to clarify.
Absolutely.
Something that was brought up in the call of the public. Because, again, if I was in a rural area not utilizing a wastewater treatment plant, I wouldn't want to be hit with a bill. It wouldn't be fair. So, and I wanted to clarify that because that's the way I understood it to be. So, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand what you're saying about the development that's happening, paying for the improvements necessary. But I think the magnitude of some of these improvements to the sewer plant, will not be able to be, and we will never be able to even ask a developer to pay all of them, that those improvements are going to fall on the backs of the 4,500 existing taxpayers, those sewer plant improvements. I'm not talking about the tie-in fees. And if we get the kind of bond that the developer pays back, let's say every time he builds a home, I mean, it's going to cost like $14,000 per tap-in, plus the $1 million for him to just tie into the main line, and that doesn't count the improvements that are going to be necessary to the main sewer plant. No developer is going to agree to pay for those improvements to the sewer plant. That capacity is going to need to be paid for by the existing 4,500 taxpayers. There's no way out of it. Whether we get a loan, a millage, take it out of the general fund, or there's not enough money in the general fund to pay it.
How many sewer bills are currently sent out? Does anybody know? How many sewer bills are sent out?
Somewhere around 4,600.
Okay, so it'd be those individuals that would be paying for it. Only the people in the sewer district.
Only the ones utilizing
Only the
it.
people on sewer. No one else in the township would be paying for it.
Unless it's in the form of some kind of millage, like what I've heard talked about, kind of off the record, is that the builder would pay for some of the improvements and to tie in, and then the township would fund the sewer plant improvement to some extent, whether we'd kick in $1 million or $2 million. Where does that $1 million or $2 million come from? Just people who use the sewer? No, it would probably be
Well, I think that
a
we-
millage, the money going into the general fund, or a bond that we would be paying off in monthly payments after agreeing to a millage.
I think since the township,
I don't know.
I really
those are
do
just
think
my
that
layman's
we're
terms.
jumping ahead quite a bit.
well, I think since the township 26 years ago identified the need for a storage basin and has kicked it down the road for 26 years, it's a bit ridiculous that the infrastructure has not been addressed in those 26 years. Currently today, we could need this just based on the houses that are built today in our community being occupied. And we haven't dealt with it in 26 years, and that's an embarrassment. That's an absolute embarrassment. You know, we don't need to talk about future development at all. What we need to talk about is we have an issue that we haven't addressed as a community in 26 years. That's ridiculous.
I agree. Wayne?
We've paid thousands and thousands of dollars for studies. We have never done anything, so I don't know if we need another study. I'm wondering about, I'm looking at your information on the REUs for North Territorial, and it says the Sunoco I'm wondering, are any of these metered on North Territorial?
No.
Excuse me?
No.
Okay, it says 2 meters, two REUs for Sunoco. Well, we know they're paying for 8 or 10 or something, aren't they, or more? the Sunoco station that built the restaurant in there. And then we got Carter Lumber, 1, Dog Training, 1, Bloom Roofing, 1. Bloom Roofing is now a trash company. Raytech is built on out there, the rest area built on, it says 22 for the rest area. Well, they've made that place a lot bigger than it was. I'm just wondering if we're charging enough money with no meters on these places. Are they paying for what they're getting processed at the plant? Does anybody know? I mean, did anybody redo the rest area? The amount of REUs there when they doubled the size of it?
I'll answer that. The REUs, the cost of the REUs for a business is based on our ordinance. And
based on what, Howard?
On our ordinance. So if you go into our sewer use ordinance, there is a section in our sewer use ordinance that details how an REU is calculated for a particular business. Now, we've talked about it at this board on a number of occasions. We've made some slight modifications to that, and most recently, a few months ago, Tim, right? We made a modification related to if somebody wanted a meter and it wasn't part of the ordinance. I don't remember the perfect particulars of it. But that's all indicated in the ordinance. Now, sure, you can tweak that. We use what Brian Rubel has presented to us as our expert, which is a table that is relatively promulgated throughout the engineering community. I'm not saying it's the perfect table. I'm just saying it's what people use, what a lot of communities use, and essentially we just say, what kind of business are you? We match it up to the table, we create an REU, and we try to be as equitable as possible. It's not perfect, but that's the way it's done. Now, there's no question, and Mr. Dockett very correctly brought up the issue of how many REUs was this building paying, and we addressed that. So clearly there are some businesses out there that we probably have missed and need to be reevaluated and make sure that everybody's in compliance, but we're systematically going through that and trying to do that. That's the answer to your question, Mr. Dockett, as to how those are constructed.
Well, I understand. Brian Rubel said this should be 4 units, and Tim said it should be 17, so I don't put much stock in Brian Rubel's opinion. But the rest area says 22. They've doubled the size of the rest area out there. I'm just wondering if we're keeping up with if somebody is checking this out and we're charging enough money. If we've got a lot more flow than what's getting paid for. Thank you.
So Brian, I got a question, and I'm going to back this up a little bit. For a typical township, we haven't done a study in over 10 years, and that really concerned me. How often should a study be performed or reviewed?
Like a master plan for a sewer system? Or?
I'm almost going, that's the direction that I'm going.
You know, every community is different.
Because I'm surprised that this isn't part of our master plan, that some part of it wasn't incorporated into the master plan.
Every community is different.
Okay.
I do work for a community in Macomb County who does one every 5 years, just regularly. They put it in their budget. Others do it every 15 or 20.
Okay.
That's all.
The data that you have here, even if a new study was done, what does that entail? I mean, like, will you find out anything more than you already know?
Well, let me tell you what a master plan would give you, and clearly it's your decision. There's a couple things. The storage tank, for instance, that was sized 26 years ago. the criteria for that was dictated by the DEQ in 2002. They developed a whole new standard of how to size that facility. So at some point, you probably want to take a close look at that using the DEQ's guidance that was published in 2002. You know, if you do identify growth areas, it would be helpful to size sewers, trunk sewers, to serve those growth areas. Right now, that is not real available. So if there's a growth development somewhere, we can do a good job of sizing it for the petition development, but we want to size the sewer for the areas in between, and that data isn't available right now. So that's the other thing that a master plan would help with.
Are you talking about a capital improvement plan or a master plan?
Well, the master plan would end up with, it wouldn't be a capital improvement plan that's programmed by year, but at least it would identify capital improvements needed
Right.
as growth knocked on your door.
Right, because we didn't even consider, well, it wasn't part of what we considered as a planning commission when we were working on a capital improvement plan. It wasn't on the radar screen, but it should be on the radar screen. Because I'm looking at page 7 of this 2003 report, and it says at the end of page 7 that after the construction of Whitmore Lake High School, and we know it's constructed, it'll further reduce the available capacity at the treatment plant to approximately 150 REUs. We haven't put on any more capacity since the high school has been built, so is that a real number, 150?
I think you have more than that, because I think this was assuming some developments that were occurring, this report, that did not materialize.
Well, that's not mentioned in here.
They're also, see, what they're doing too in this is they're saying, on this page, they're saying that the North Territorial area, that capacity is reserved. That, again, that's something that you need to decide, whether that is reserved or it's available to others.
Yeah, that was in there.
Page 9?
Yeah.
Good.
So.
Well, and is it normal for, you know, I know we want to have the sewer capacity available for the people that already have a sewer in front of them, but if they're not doing anything with it,
Right.
you know, where do we go? I mean, do we allow someone else to take the capacity, but then bill that person extra high, you know, sewer tap fees, or what, I'm not in the business, I don't know what it might be called, but
Right.
let's say higher sewer tap fees, to maintain a fund to make the improvements in the future when it's needed? Is that normal common practice?
Yes, it would be. Let's take the storage tank as an example. Let's say the agreement is to build a storage tank in a year or two. You estimate the price of that. It would not be uncommon to adjust your connection fee such that you are recovering from new connections a prorated share of that storage tank.
And just make sure I've understood it correctly, that you're saying right now we're at a pretty sensitive level with, you know, DEQ or in that level right now? What?
Yeah, I mean, if you
Regardless
added,
of any development?
yeah, if you added 10, 20, 30 homes, I don't think the DEQ would bat an eye. What they require you to do is, for every extension of the sewer system, have an engineer certify that there is plenty of capacity to take on this extension. At some point in the near future, and whatever that number is it 100 or 150, that's going to be hard to do. That's going to be hard to do.
Well, anybody who paid the per footage price, anyone on North Territorial, anyone on 7 Mile Road, anyone in Green Oak that paid per footage when it was, and then you're gonna tell them, well, I'm sorry, but you can't hook up. I mean, no, we.
Right, I agree 100%. I don't think you should ever take, that away from
okay,
someone.
well, I
But we are at the point right now that we cannot handle what we've already said is available?
If you, put it this way, if North Territorial built out tomorrow, Tim's going to have a heck of a time when it rains at the plant. I think you'll violate your permit.
We already has a heck of a time.
I gave you an extreme example, but,
Yeah, but no, I mean, just understand.
yeah.
But he already has a heck of a time at the plant on those rainy days. He does. I mean, that's a reality. I guess one of the things too that, and I guess I'll address this to the township board. As we look at things, whether it be focusing energies to downtown for growth, whether it be commercial growth down there, trying to get that going, whether it be residential growth in areas that are within the master plan, any of that stuff, there needs to be a vision, and that vision needs to be able to have this kind of stuff, because if someone comes tomorrow and does want to do some development on a particular piece of property in the hamlet area that is of a larger size, the day that happens, when I think everyone would love to see that, regardless of where they are in the township, and we go, oh, that's a problem, we can't do that because, 20 some odd years ago we didn't follow through with a plan. A vision for the community, for the different areas of our township is very important, especially as we do try to find the ways to grow appropriately for the members of our community. I think it's something that we have lacked for years. While we've had ideas here and ideas there, a comprehensive vision, and beyond a master plan. What I'm talking about is kind of putting your money where your mouth is in the township level, because if you want someone somewhere, you got to understand, it's got to be an economic reality. If someone doesn't want to build there and they're a developer, they're not going to build there. It doesn't matter unless it's worth their while to build there, unless there's a good reason to build there, unless you have done something to make that area more attractive than the area 1 mile down the road. If you want them 1 mile this way, you got to make it more attractive to be 1 mile this way. And with this problem, this is a huge obstacle for us to do anything. And, whether it be a visioning session with the planning commission and the township board, or the township board has it, something needs to happen on that front.
I think that we have the vision, because we've done the Whitmer Lake Overlay District in the master plan. What we need is the infrastructure to support the vision, so that people can actually do what we'd like to see them do in the areas that we have them.
It's going to take more than putting it on paper, though.
No, we have, so I say you have
And,
to do
and,
something.
and, and that's an appropriations.
Oh, we had a vision on North Territorial Road that never happened, so.
Well, and I know, people talking about the Van Curler property, and I agree with you. It's a beautiful piece, but we can't make someone build there or develop there, And if someone did ever come, we'd be having the same conversation, a year down the road, 5 years down the road, that we don't have a room for you on our system, We are at a point that developers, because of my real estate background, I am aware that you can get developers to pay for some of your stuff. If they want it bad enough, they'll pay for it, that you never know what someone's willing to pay. I mean, obviously, you don't want to give a special assessment to an entire community for sewers. I mean,
No.
Absolutely not. But if someone wants it,
Right, well, they'll pay for it if they can make money after the fact.
absolutely.
The one question I have is, with what we have currently in the Hamlet area, even outside the Hamlet area, is there any residents now that are not tied into the sewer district? That we feel that eventually they should be?
I'm not aware of any, Tim. Maybe you are. I thought that was pretty well sewered.
Well, don't you
So
have,
that's one area that we don't even have to worry about? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one area, don't you think you have to be worried about is when you got 7 Mile, you got Donna Lane property that's already approved, correct?
Yeah, you cannot get a building permit if you're if you're in the sewer district, you cannot get a building permit unless you hook into the sewer.
Right, but is the Donna Lane property already sewered?
Yes, well, no, 7 Mile Road is.
Well, 7 Mile is, right, but that's like an approved subdivision,
Well,
is
for
it?
nothing else, there's only one house that's on sewer there.
Right.
Are you looking at me?
No, just the Donna Lane property
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, the Donna Lane property is on a special assessment district.
Okay.
So they're currently paying into their SAD for sewer. There's a special assessment district there. I don't know if they've paid it off completely.
because that's
But
an
there
approved
is- there-
subdivision that was approved years ago, right?
Well, it was approved, and it's now back in front of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission's reviewing an extension on it. It's about 61, 62 units, and it does have theoretical sewer, I guess is what I'm saying. It's got sewer around it, and it is in the, they are paying the SAD on the sewer and/or have already paid for the SAD. So I hope that answers the question.
Only Donald Northrop and myself paid cash there, the rest of them are, I paid $10,200 when they went by, and Donald paid $50,000. Samuel's property there, he knows it, there's only 2 that paid cash.
Ken, were you talking about the manufactured home community that are not using their?
Well, yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. You got 100 empty lots, and you got about 20 to 40 empty units that haven't been adding to the flow that is being seen at the wastewater treatment plant for the last year and a half to 2 years.
But prior to that, there were.
Prior to that, they were, but we're looking at flows, this report is on present-day flows. That's correct. Well, and it says 100 new homes will have a significant increase. Well, we're going to have, maybe we won't. Maybe they'll never fill those 100 and some odd lots. I don't know. I would anticipate that at some point they would, and at that point in time, we're going to see 100 new additions to the flow rates that have to be considered, in my mind, as built homes that are going to be providing flow at some point in the future. It's not like an undeveloped lot. It's not like an undeveloped piece of property that is planned for development. These are, all the stuff's there.
They were already on.
Yes, at one time they were on the sewer, they just aren't contributing to the flow today.
And Maxie's all included in all your flow numbers here, or?
I'm sorry?
Maxie, the woodland facility now?
It's measured at the plant, so it's included in the analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any further questions for Brian? If not, I can ask Paul to maybe give a quick understanding of what we have, agreements with Green Oak Township that we have?
Let me
I'm sure
back-
we'll have more questions.
What's that? Let me back up for kind of a bird's eye explanation of the regulatory power on the plant, because we're kind of down in the smallest piece of this, but there are bigger parts of this. And basically, this plant was originally, as I understand, was built by the state as part of the prison system or whatnot, and the township bought it. But years ago in the 1970s, there was a lawsuit by the downstream townships under the Michigan Environmental Protection Act to restrict the flow of the plant down into Strawberry Lake and into Livingston County. And so there was a lawsuit in the Livingston County Circuit Court where Judge Mahinsky, and you have it in your packet, issued a written opinion. And then, so over the years, this plant has been regulated by both a permit from the Department of Natural Resources and also by court orders out of the Livingston County Circuit Court, because although the plant services properties both in Washington and Livingston County, the plant itself is in Livingston County, and that's why the court action was in Livingston County. So there are a couple of court orders that restrict the effluent of the plant per gallonages, and they're in your packet. As part of that litigation over the years, some of which I handled, in 1991 there was a supplemental order, And there was also an intergovernmental agreement executed between the townships and Hamburg Township where a portion of the capacity of the plant was potentially sold to Hamburg Township. There's also originally a special assessment district around the lake that is in part in Green Oak Township, and an intergovernmental agreement that relates to Green Oak Township for the special assessment around the lake as well. So the odd part of this plant is that there is court regulation of this plant by court orders, and there is also regulation by permit from the Department of Natural Resources, or whatever it's called this week. So what you've been discussing really are the current physical limitations of the plant and how you have storage to equalize the flow so that you can make the most out of the capacity that you have, so you level out the peaks, if you will, of the flow. You sense all that. The township has done a number of special assessment districts. And those are people who have paid for capacity in the plant, so to speak. They've got a timeshare or a reservation at the inn. When you're in a special assessment district, you prepaid to reserve capacity in the plant. And so that is also an additional restriction on the plant, but it's also a legal obligation that the township has to fulfill those special assessment districts for people who have paid for capacity in the plant. So where you sit now is you really need to do an inventory, I think, as Mr. Dockett was kind of alluding to, is that how much capacity do you have reserved to Green Oak? How much capacity do you have reserved to Hamburg Township? How much capacity should you have reserved for the special assessment districts that are in place? How much capacity do you need to service the vacant properties that already are in sewer districts that may not be in a special assessment district but are still in the village or in the trailer park or wherever there are sewer lines? And how does that relate to your permit and the court orders? And I'm afraid that to some degrees, the township has lost track of all of this. It doesn't really have a valid inventory of what its commitments are, what the actual physical capacity of the plant, what the legal requirements of the permit, and what the court orders have to essentially restrict, or the question is your hotel full? You know, have you sold all the timeshares already? And I don't think the township really has an inventory of all that. So it's really difficult for you to make planning decisions going forward. To Mr. Dingman's question is like, how do you keep addressing growth if you don't know if it's going to go into the plant and you don't know really how much you've sold, if you will? Not just what the actual flow is, but what you've committed to take. I just heard the North Territorial District, if it completely sold out, these people already paid for the capacity. And there's been lawsuits where if you paid for the capacity and then you hook in 10 years later and it's not there and you can't build anything, that piece of property is worth nothing. And so there's been plenty of property owners that sue when you go to construct and you're part of an SAD and there's no capacity in the plant even though you paid for it. So my concern from a legal perspective is I'm not sure that the township has a handle on the overall, what's the actual flow, what are the actual commitments, and how does it relate to the permit, and how does it relate to the court orders. The questions that Brian was addressing is if you do construction, you have a whole other list of legal concerns about how do you bond for it, how do you borrow, how do you finance it. And typically you finance it either through the rate, the quarterly rate, or you finance it through connection fees. But the problems that communities have gotten into is they project connection fees, they don't come, they sell the bonds, and then they're stuck with the debt. That's Sylvan Township. And so typically the new users are charged for the expansion, but if for some reason there's a default, it falls back on the general fund of the township to pay the rest of the bill. So my suggestion here is that because it's so important to the future of the township that there really needs to be not so much a master plan, but an inventory of what it is that you've committed to, both actual flow, special assessments, Hamburg Township, Green Oak Township. What is your legal, contractual, and, can you fulfill that when these people pull a permit? Otherwise, you're not going to be able to perform. If you can't perform, then you've got to consider some kind of equalization basin or storage capacity just to meet your current commitments, not necessarily for future growth or future developments or whatever. So that's really the question, I think, from my standpoint, there should be an inventory of this to take a snapshot to see where you're at before you can figure out where you're going to go. So hopefully that gives you some overarching history. So you've got court orders, permits, intergovernmental agreements, and physical limitations. And then when you go to build, you're going to have bonding questions.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for Paul?
I have one question for Tim. Have you got permission from the state to, or what do you have from the state that says you can you double the size? Can you, I mean, is there a percentage, or do you not have any information on that?
Our permit, as Brian said, was okayed up to 3.0 billion gallons a day.
These.
For the average.
What did you say?
Tim, he can't hear you. You need to speak into a microphone. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Well,
As Brian said earlier, we do have a permit that we can expand up to 3.0 million gallons a day on average.
What are we doing now?
I'm sorry?
How much capacity do we have now?
We're currently running, as of today, around 600,000, 630,000 gallons per day.
So you can make it twice as big, or?
No, current capacity.
The current plant capacity is 1.3 million gallons a day.
And we can go to 3?
Average.
And we use 600,000 to 700,000.
That is correct,
But
during dry weather.
But you have licenses from the state that you can do more.
Right, but the court order has lower limits than the permits from the state.
Okay, thank you.
1.5.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Okay, so my assumption, Mr. Burns, is that you can put together some sort of a chart telling us where we're at, reading through all of the legalese here and
2.25.
figuring it all out?
So the court order, as Mr. Burns indicated, there's an amended court order that says we can go up to 2.25. The state permit is 3, but our intergovernmental agreement is 2.25, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, that's because of the discharge. They're concerned about the discharge from it?
Well, it's primarily, if I'm not mistaken, it's the phosphorus discharge that's the big issue.
Oh.
It's the phosphorus issue, or phosphorus levels, is really the big issue that people tie into both the state and the regulatory.
Are you talking into the mic, Howard?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Correct, for the expert sewer folks in the audience, it's the phosphorus issue that's really the critical issue on sewer expansions. So it's that's really what people tie into, is how much ability do you have to discharge phosphorus? How much phosphorus ability do you have to discharge? We're one of the few communities that have that expansion possibility, because it was permitted many years ago.
And other communities would like to buy our capacity.
I can't answer that, Mr. Dockett.
So this inventory that Paul spoke of, which, again, Paul, thank you, because that's a perfect summary. And to me, as a planning commissioner, that is something I would be very, very much well interested in. Brian, is that something Tetra-Tech would do? Or who would prepare this inventory such as Paul described?
I'll have to speak for Mr. Burns. I think it would probably be a joint effort between an engineering consultant and the township's legal counsel, because there are...
And probably Tim, right?
Sure, yeah. There are both engineering and legal matters in that accounting, so.
I would be in favor to proceed with getting this inventory list. I think it's critical for all of us to know what we do have, and don't know how we want to, get some direction here from everyone, possibly, or do we need cost? There's so much.
Go ahead. Okay. In this judgment from 2002, Paul?
Yes.
Do we already have an equalization basin? Is that something else than this retaining basin we're talking about? Because in this judgment, it says we can expand to 2.2, which would also include the construction of an equalization basin as described in Exhibit A. And then, do we have this intermunicipal sewer committee that we were instructed to create in 2002? Because it says the board, each board shall have 2 members, and I don't know which 2 on our board are sitting on it.
I'm just going from memory, but the way, and Brian can jump in here, but one of the least expensive ways to increase the capacity of the plant is to stabilize the flow into the plant. And so what was discussed at that time was building an equalization basin. I don't know if Brian means the same thing as a storage basin, but the equalization basin basically holds the effluent, so it goes into the plant on a continuous stream, and there's no spikes, there's no peaks and valleys. And so what was discussed back then was the township building an equalization basin so that the plant could efficiently handle more effluent. And then because at the time, and still, Hamburg Township was looking for capacity to sewer its village, and Green Oak has part of the lake. The theory was because it's an environmental issue which goes downstream to the Strawberry-Zuki Lake area, they get the effluent, they get the phosphorus, that there would be this committee that would review the environmental aspects of that as the project went forward. I don't think it ever got invoked because the project got dropped. I mean, the equalization basin never got built, it never got designed, it never got bid out, it just never happened. But it's something that's still in place in the intergovernmental agreement potentially if we have to go forward. But I think that's what Brian's proposing now essentially is an equalization basin at some point in time to help make the plant run more efficiently.
So we
Is that
don't
what
have
I'm
a
hearing,
current
Brian?
cost on that, right?
That's correct. The equalization would be also used for dry weather smoothing of the flow, but there is a wet weather issue too that has to be addressed concurrently. And again, plant capacity and storage are related. If you looked at that chart, if the plant capacity increased, there'd be less storage needed. So it sort of needs to be looked at as a whole body. How much growth there would be would then dictate the plant capacity, and then that would dictate the storage. So it's all related.
So we don't have a current cost on what the equalization basin would run? No, it's old.
No, there was something done
Yeah.
10 years ago, but again, the whole criterion that the state requires that to be sized to changed about the same time. So it would have to be looked at again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do find the numbers amazing and all the expansions and the equalization basin were, suggested back in 88, 93, 98. And so this has been a very ongoing issue that no board has ever taken on. And it is critical, I think, that we get at least this inventory list, which I agree, with Wayne, if you've given it to someone, better make sure it's there, Brian, do you have any idea how much something like an inventory list would cost?
Boy, I'd like to get back to you on that because I think the scope of that would dictate the fee. So I think we first need to, as a team, figure out the scope of it.
Right.
Yeah, Wayne?
I don't want people to wig out because I don't spend money, but if you know, we've done all this and we never spent the money after we paid hundreds of thousands of dollars probably for the studies. So I think we need to say, if we're going to have a study, we're going to move on it. I mean, why get a study and not do anything? So I know we don't know how much it's going to cost, but I think we need to make a commitment to follow through.
Mr. Dogger, with all due respect, I think we need work to figure out just where we're at. Okay, we've been talking months about where we might go, and what this information reveals is we don't know where we're at. And until we have a probably a legal, a moral, and an ethical obligation to people in other townships to make sure that we're not already in trouble with regard to commitments that we've made. This is not about where we're going to put things. This is right now, we have to find out what position we're in. And that's got to happen as quickly as possible.
I was thinking of the holding tanks is what I was thinking of.
I think the other thing is, and I'll say this for Mr. Rubel, is that, and I think we have to be cautious about when we say that, you know, we're going to do a study or we're going to spend whatever X amount of dollars, we need to understand what it is that we're paying for and what it is that we're getting. Because we can't expect, for example, if we create an inventory of what effluent we have that's required, that we have to have capacity for, you know, that's a different process than, for example, understanding the sizing of an equalization basin or understanding and I see Brian shaking his head, so I know he's thinking the exact same thing, or the sizing of, you know, some kind of additional force main. We need to understand that, you know, not one study answers every question. And so I think that's important. It's just some conversations that Brian and I have had, so I wanted to share that with the board as well, just related to Mr. Dockett's comments. And the truth is, you know, I mean, the real truth is that we have a lot of old data. We have a lot of old data. We're making a lot of assumptions. We have information from 2003, 1998, 2005, you know, this is why it's taken us a while to get to this point, because, you know, we've been scratching our heads trying to figure it out to get to this meeting so that we could present it to everyone, so that we could learn and then present it to everyone as to exactly what's happening.
I'm not sure where to go from here. I think it is a serious issue. It needs to be addressed. How can we get going on this, and how quickly, just for our current customers to know what is going on?
Well, I think what we can do is Tim, because this is the team, Tim, myself, Brian, and Paul, we can get together and try to figure out exactly the questions that we need to answer, and then we can come back to the board and have a clear understanding of what questions we're answering and in what steps are we answering those questions. And I think Brian can give us a reasonable cost estimate of what that's going to cost. And it's important to note that, you know, just from listening to the conversations, having an inventory is not having a sewer master plan, for example, right? So you know, if the goal, for example, is to identify, and I'm not implying any particular area, I'm just saying hypothetically, if the goal is to identify where a sewer trunk goes and the size of that sewer trunk and the capacity of that sewer trunk, and look at the whole township and collate it with the master plan and what the board and the planning commission want for growth, that's a whole different analysis. And what I have come to realize is that a lot of that work just isn't here. It just doesn't, it doesn't exist in Northfield Township from a sewer perspective, not, you know, not from other perspectives. So, again, that's kind of where we are. I don't know if I answered any question.
Is it possible to break down those costs as, one, give us the inventory, and then second, you know, kind of, you know, develop a sewer master plan to coincide with our master plan as we have it? I mean, like, you know, we have, you see what, you know what I'm saying? You know, that, can you break it down into the cost so we can figure out?
The first step, I think, is going to be fairly straightforward. The inventory, we can work that out. I certainly could give you ranges in pretty short order for different levels of study. And I hate to give you, I really would need to sit down with Howard for hours on end, and go, or Tim, and go through a scope to give you a firm fee. But if you're looking for a range, it'll be a broad range. We could do that fairly quickly. Yeah.
We have something, say, within a month to look at? You need more time than that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, in a month we can get back to the board.
I mean, I guess before we adjourn to discuss scope, the question is, the issue is, what are the questions that we need to be answering? So I guess I would throw that back to the board and the planning commission as to what do we want to answer.
Good point.
Yep. We definitely need to answer the issue of the inventory.
Right.
But in addition to the inventory, do we want to answer the question of the equalization basin? I don't know. I mean, so.
You
Can't we
kind
have
of
both?
have to. It's our legal responsibility.
Yeah. Right.
It's been identified. I mean, as a planning commissioner, we can't even think about addressing any other development that would come in front of us without having the inventory and the basin
Cost, yeah.
coincide.
I would think you'd at least want to have that cost, because you're approaching it very closely already, and it would already assist the system. So,
Right.
at the very least, I would hope that somebody would throw some numbers about the storage or equalization system.
Larry, what you're saying is that the basin might be necessary right now.
Well,
So let's go ahead and price that.
From what I'm reading in this, you know.
Yeah, I think I come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. You're talking, already currently with some flows, and if you get even an additional 100, that's gonna increase that. So I think you're at that point. I mean, that's my perspective on it.
I think, well, we have the master plan, so we know in the master plan where we want or would like to see development. And I guess one of the questions I would like answered is, what do we need to serve what we already have in the sewer system? But also, if the master plan were to build out the way it's been identified, what additional capacity might there be needed within, the areas where we've identified for growth in the master plan? It's not they're not currently in the sewer system, but, if you could draw some boundaries, I know you can get numbers based on acreages on how many REUs you would need. That would be a good question to have answered, too.
Okay. It just, certainly it can be done, the more what-ifs there are, the bigger the level of effort is.
Right.
Is all.
And that's a board decision.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I see. It's been pointed to me that it's 10 o'clock this evening, and we still have some other items on our agenda that we still need to go through. Brian, thank you for your presentation. Does anyone have any quick questions that need to be answered here, or anything that can? Okay, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
Anyone else have any other thoughts, anything for Paul Burns? Okay. So we do have a meeting limit of 10 o'clock, but we had, such a big agenda here and lots to talk about. So it is now 10 o'clock, so we will still continue on with our agenda. Sorry, everyone, for going over. That takes us to our second call to the public. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Come on up.
Digging through the report.
Talk into the mic, will you please? I wear hearing aids and I cannot hear when you're not talking.
No, it's not on.
Okay, sorry. I appreciate, really excellent discussion, is worth the wait. Looking through the report, I noticed a couple of things, and it clearly shows that it needs to be updated. But if you look at page 15, Table 2, it shows a number of areas and REU projections for each of the different areas, and it totals 7,000 REUs, which is really interesting because I think we're at 1,500 now, is what I understand, the current number of households feeding the system. But this, if you look at the previous page, on page 14, it says, using the development densities in Table 1, a 70% development assumption gets you to these numbers. And that's in here. I think this is the kind of thing that needs to be updated. And matching that to the master plan is exactly what everybody's been talking now, is exactly right. But I don't know that the green oak in this study was even considered. I can't tell for sure about the areas, but it doesn't look like some of the green oak area were considered in here. But this is exactly what they did maybe 15 years ago, is they looked at the area, they assumed 70% density. This is what the build-out rate's going to be. And this whole plan, the way I understand it, was upsizing the plant to accommodate that level. So what Wayne brought up was perfect. It's exactly what we need to understand, is what are our commitment to the areas that have already been identified for housing. And I did also notice, just for the fun of it, on towards the back there was a total cost of $12 million at that time for the upgrades. 1.8 million was for the basin. Seems to make sense to put a basin in right away. I have an engineering background, so I like digging into this stuff, but obviously putting a basin in right away makes sense. The big question is how big. You really need to understand the whole picture to decide how large a basin needs to go in. I know people that work at the plant, and they have had some exceedances, so it's obvious that that's something that probably ought to be acted on right away. So I think this is the kind of study you want, just updated and matching the master plan that was mentioned earlier is, I think, exactly what the residents want to see. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Dave Gordon, 5558 Helmer. The elephant in the room is Biltmore. That's the reason that we're here talking about sewers. Maybe that's one good thing that might come out of this whole thing. But I would hope that when the board directs Tetra-Tech to look into costs, that they talk about what the cost associated would be with extending sewers all the way down to Joy Road, or what the cost might be for the entire township if you decide that you're going to put subdivisions all the way up and down Route 23 on a mile on either side, because there's been members of the Planning Commission who have a vision that everything west of Nala Road is going to be built out. What would that really cost? I think it's important to know these numbers before we start talking to developers about big projects down in the rural area that are well outside of the master plan. It's basic information, and if we go through this whole process and we don't even still know at the end of it what it's going to cost us to bring a subdivision into a farm area, I think it's important that we get that information as part of our basic toolkit as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think part of the study, I think the one thing that you said that really perked my ears up was what happened in Sylvan Township, you said? Who said Sylvan Township? Yeah, I think it might be interesting to add that to your study a little bit and find out exactly what happened there, and detail that and really figure that out, because that seemed to me, we're talking futures and estimating what would happen if everything, all the ducks lined up in a row and everything was perfect. And then we look at Sylvan Township to see what happens when that doesn't come to fruition. So I guess that all I would say is have that as part of your study. And I also want to say thank you to all of you for your hard work. We really do appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
of 6431 Whitmore Lake Road. It's kind of a replay. We had this several months ago here, and most of you guys were not here. It was when we got invited for public hearings about the Whitmore Lake new sewer systems, and we were informed, and I get this more and more, not in the best way. And now we also, at the later time, we came in front of the board to make our case here and asked that we get exempted from this kind of sewer system. And I still remember that the board voted violently all in favor to do this. So it is not only that Tetra-Tech is not doing the homework, there's a lot of other stuff not going to work with the homework here. And I can only say that in horse terms, you put the cart in front of the horse. Keep on going with that.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Real quick, we're way past our deadline.
I just had one other question. Does this commission have authority to raise tax on everyone that's paying the sewer system? I wasn't sure how that's determined. I mean, I'd be happy to pay more. I currently are in the sewer system. I'd happy to pay more if the development met the master plan and helped the community. Kind of like I'd pay more for schools, same kind of a thing. But I wasn't sure, does this commission have the authority to raise the sewer assessment independently, or does that go to the public? It would just be assessed directly?
Yeah, we just raised them a quarter ago.
So that's pretty important, because I'd be happy to
But
pay a
they
little
haven't
more
been
to help the
raised
development.
in what?
I'm not sure I'd want to pay more to develop something 10 miles
10
south
years.
of the city. So.
All right. Great, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Board member comments. Larry, you want to start down here? You have anything?
I'll make it quick. I appreciate having a joint discussion on this. I think it improves the whole process, and I think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Sam?
Yes, thank you. Two things. When we did have our last joint meeting, there were many residents in favor, and I want to just mention it, in favor of a development on Whitmore Lake Road, just north of Joy Road. If you remember, it was probably pretty equal, 50-50. So I just want to mention it because those folks aren't here again tonight. So, thank you. And then the second item is that the information that people are given, say at the polls, people can construe information one way or another, so people are going to be for or against. So the information that people should be given should be supplied by the township, so it's the actual proper information that is gone through legal counsel before people make a determination in the public. Because as people were mentioning here, they were there giving out information, but who knows the information that they were giving out if they were construing it in a way where people naturally are not going to be in favor of growth. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
The only thing I have is a community announcement that there will be a meeting of the Whitmore Lake Board of Education next Monday at 7 p.m. at the Whitmore Lake High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Marlene?
I would just like to mention that this is really the very start of the process as these studies keep coming back, as we take a look at development anywhere that's going to get sewer extended to it. And so everyone's here is concerned about the Biltmore project, but this is one of the studies, and we asked for 4. So we really are dealing with all of this publicly at our public meetings. So, you know, I hear a lot of rumors going around, and they're really rumors. So listen in on the meetings. We're going to deal with it publicly. Stuff is not going on that you're not going to hear about. So just keep your ears open, and you'll get the straight scoop at the Planning Commission meetings or the Board of Trustee meetings. And you know, so when you get information out there, just take it in, but then look for what's going on here officially too. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments, and Marlene actually hit on, and Sam, the issue of communication. We have been having this discussion for months. It's been in the current. We've talked about it at the board. We've talked about it at the Planning Commission. So if people aren't hearing it, then they're not reading the paper. They're not watching the meetings or coming to the meetings. I don't know that we could do anything more unless we went out knocking on doors. So it behooves people, if they're really interested in their township, to pay attention to these meetings and listen, and then you would know. And the other issue of communication is that a lot of the communication that's going on is a lot of rumor. There seems to be an assumption that we know more than we're telling people. We don't. You know what we know. You hear what we hear when we're here. We don't have anything that we haven't talked about in public. This, again, was the first study that we had got, and it's an old study, actually, other than a little bit of summary that we got from Brian Rubel. So there really hasn't been a current study done, and we don't have any other studies, and it doesn't sound like they're in the works right now either. Excuse me, I apologize, I have a little cold. The other issue was with the flyer that went out. I was offended as a board member and as a trustee, as a planning commission member, that one of the items on there was that several of the board members or elected officials were courting Biltmore. I don't know anybody here that is courting Biltmore, and I really, when I hear also about this being an adversarial back and forth between people, there is no adversarial communication from us to you. We might be getting it this way or between people, but we respect what you say. I listen very carefully to what people say, and I take it to heart, and some people make some really intelligent comments and things that make me think about things, and as well as everybody else on the board as well. So please don't make assumptions or innuendos about what we're thinking or what we're doing. If you really want to know the facts, ask one of us, because we'll tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Wayne?
I'd like to ask people to buy and use local services when they can. And happy Veterans Day. You should kiss a vet tonight if you can. Thank you.
Wayne's a vet.
We're not kissing you.
Angie?
I'd also like to say happy Veterans Day and thank you to all our veterans. We had a wonderful voting turnout, so thank you to everyone who showed up to vote. And thank you to our wonderful volunteers who come out and make it possible for people to vote.
Kathy? Okay. Jackie, got anything?
Yeah, I have two things. One is on a lighter note. The 4th of July Parade Committee is sponsoring a holiday gala on Saturday, December 6th at the Links of Whitmore Lake Golf Course. Tickets are $25 a person. Proceeds from the event goes towards the 2015 4th of July Parade. And if anybody is interested, please contact me. I have tickets. And I also want to thank the veterans who served in the military. My father, my uncles have served. And the freedom that we value so much in this country is attributed to those people that have fought in the war for us. So I want to also thank the military men and women that currently serve today.
Thank you, Jackie. Tracy?
I have no comments.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for a wonderful meeting. I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Support. I would like to say we did have a wonderful election.